Hello everyone, welcome back into another episode of Last Protagonist reacting to a bunch of videos. Hope you're doing well as always. So, on yesterday's stream, we checked out Mild Conviction, Souls-Likes versus Pure Action and the Parry Problem. Then Honored Madman's Cursed Divinity, Elden Ring Lore, which ironically enough we'd watched once before, so whoops. Then we finish things with Selin the Astrologer, History, Fate, and the Mystery in the Lands Between by Erebons. So for today, I have A Tragedy's Messmer Caused the Shattering, Elden Ring Lore Theory. Then Fat Brett's The Horrific Truth Behind Marika's Godhood, and Zaminical's FromSoftware Fans Lost the Plot since we didn't get to that yesterday. And depending on time, the Erdtree is a Stamen, also by A Tragedy here. So, going into this first video, I have some fairly strong disagreements, and I don't know if this is going to be like an X causes Y causes Z kind of situation, and we're just dealing with multiple degrees of separation or anything like that, or if they're trying to literally claim that it has like some direct tie-ins to the Knight of Black Knives. So I'm a little bit apprehensive about this, but we'll have to see where it goes. So anyway, wanted to welcome you all back in. We have Iman, the True Connoisseur, Scaleezy, Asnex. How's it going, you guys? Oh, True Connoisseur is at a 6.5 out of 10. My condolences. Although, honestly, for me, a 6.5 would be pretty good if I would consider 5 like an average. So hopefully that's how your scale works too. So for me, I guess I'm probably about a 5 or a 6, somewhere around there. Actually, I got a new phone, and I've not been enjoying myself getting rid of all the bloatware and all that stuff. So, yeah. But a little bit of a headache, but it's a little bit nice having a phone that doesn't lose 30% of its battery in an hour of moderate use. So I got that going for me. Okay, we do share the same scale. Okay, so 6.5 isn't bad. And Jason Saltry, welcome back in. Okay, so let's go ahead and dive into Messmer Caused the Shattering by A Tragedy.
Sometimes when you're thinking about Elden Ring lore, you'll stumble onto an idea that changes everything. You begin to look at the game in an entirely different way. Then you think to yourself,
I'm going to keep it 100 off rip. This character is level 190, and I will teabag every boss I kill. I feel nothing. This is one of my 2 DLC characters. This one is set up to have Melina alive, just in case.
People need to know about this. You'll go on YouTube to see.
Cool. So YouTube's doing its 3 frames per second thing, so give me another moment to fix that. It's so goofy how I have to deal with this every single stream now, but at least I've figured out how to fix it, right?
See if anyone else has thought of it, and then you realize that the war against corporations selling your personal data is long lost. Someone has already made a video about it 12 hours before.
Yeah, speaking about that, especially with the new phone, I've just been having to deal with getting rid of like all the AI bloatware. It sucks, man. It's so annoying. At this rate, I think the next phone I'm going to get is going to be a dumb phone, a burner. I did use a burner for a bunch of years just because I didn't really care about having a smartphone. Although having a smartphone is definitely nice for certain applications like flashcards and stuff. Hey, Teen Sith, how's it going?
Beforehand. And that's what happened to me the other day with the lore YouTuber Crunchy. Twice. They have already mapped our brains and know exactly what we'll want before we want it, what we'll think before we think it. Good game, well played. But then, another idea hit me, and suddenly everything started falling into place. And then everything started falling apart. And you question why you even uploaded that first lore video you made. Because everything has changed. There is nothing more terrifying. You read the title, and yes, I've gone all the way off the deep end. But I would lose more sleep than I've already lost if I didn't get this out before Shadow of the Erdtree releases.
So I wonder if this video is in response to... Wait, I thought it... Was it Crunchy or was it Ratatosker? Who were asking for like full blown out schizo theories. So maybe this is a response to that.
To begin, let's go over the first idea that Crunchy clearly beamed directly into my brain.
Melina
The Traveler's Clothes item description reads, light yet sturdy clothes, worn by young women who set off into the world to confront their fate. These are the same clothes worn by both Melina and Millicent. No longer do I think this is just a coincidence. When Melina sees Bach crying during our journey, she'll say to our Tarnished,
I see him crying. From time to time. I think he misses his mother. He wants someone to tell him he's beautiful. Does being born of a mother mean one behaves in such a manner?
Born of a mother. For quite some time now, I haven't agreed with people in the community who read that as implying that while she has a mother, she wasn't born of one. I am now in agreement. But then that raises the question, how was she born? Well, you're probably already putting it together, but I believe she was born in the way that Millicent was born. Only instead of being...
Yeah, I think that is a possibility. My current take on it is Melina has amnesia, so she doesn't remember a thing. Although it is a very, very weird and potentially leading line for sure. And then R&R birth theories. Mike Bailey, welcome back into the stream. You got an American phone after living here for 2 years a couple weeks ago. Now all of your UK banking apps are on the USA Play Store. Cue lots of side loading and swearing. That sucks. Yeah, especially having to deal with international stuff like that. It's certainly not a streamlined process.
Being born from the bloom of a flower, she was born from the sprouting of a tree. The Erdtree. I don't want to rehash the Marika of daughter discourse, but the obvious candidate for her mother is Marika. This of course would mean that as Melina becomes the goddess of rot when she blooms, Marika became a god upon sprouting her Erdtree. So, in a way, this makes her the daughter of Marika without being born of a mother. But, as will be a common trend in this video, this raises just as many questions as it answers. With Millicent, it's clear she took on the attributes of her mother, Melina. If indeed the circumstances of their birth are similar, then it would follow that Melina inherited the attributes of Marika. But if that's true, then there's one aspect that would mean something very significant if she did indeed inherit it from Marika.
Lord of frenzied flame. I will seek you as far as you may travel. To deliver you what is yours. Destined death.
And that is where I lost the plot.
Marika is the Glomide Queen. Bingo! I was waiting to pause the video to talk about the potential timeline implications of Melina being born along with the Erdtree. I do think that's an interesting idea. I've wondered similar things myself. So the current incarnation in which we meet Melina is burned and bodiless, which may have implied that at one point she had a body that was burned to make her bodiless, essentially. And I brought that up on stream yesterday or the night before, something along those lines. And with Ronnie seeming to know the previous Master of Torrent, which is assumedly Melina, then we should have some indication that Melina existed while the Carians were around. So if she was born with the Erdtree, that's fine. Then you would also need to incorporate when she got burned and what that means for her situation. So I just wanted to bring that up now. So we'll probably dive into that further in the future.
Yeah, I don't think it's Melina anymore. So one thing that has always bothered me about Marika and Radagon is that outside of their statues, we don't get a good look at Marika and Radagon's left eye until the end of the game. Not in the trailers, cutscenes, or even items with their likeness. It isn't until the final fight of the game that we get to see their shattered and stony face. Because of the shattering, their right eye socket is empty and glows with the golden color of the Elden ring. But their left eye? Well, as a result of the shattering, that side of their head is completely missing. This has literally always bugged me, and now I know why. Sealed on the left side of Melina's face is a purple eye that only unseals in the ending where she's alive, and the rune of death is no longer sealed. For a long time, I was sipping the Occam's Razor Kool-Aid and figured the simplest explanation, that she's the Glomide Queen, is probably true. However, recently, something occurred to me. Finger Reader NES states,
And you say you seek the power of the rune of death too? The rune of death goes by two names. The other is Destined Death. The forbidden shadow plucked from the Golden Order upon its creation.
Plucked. What an odd word to use to describe removing a rune from the Elden Ring. What's interesting about the Elden Ring is that it seems to be fused with Marika, and as a result, as seen from her body being shattered after shattering the Elden Ring, damage to her is damage to the Elden Ring, and vice versa. If this is the case, then removing part of the Elden Ring would likely mean you would have to remove a part of Marika's body.
And that is something that definitely concerned me, especially as I was making my initial inquiries into the Glow-Eyed Queen video, which is why it's so damn annoying that both Marika and the Glow-Eyed Queen were called Empyreans at some point. But if the Gek was only an Empyrean, then why would she have had a rune that was legitimately part of the Elden Ring to be plucked out of it? I think that is very hard to reconcile without getting into like true Pepe Offnear territory here. And, well, I'm here for it.
You might even have to pluck it out. And as it's Melina's left eye that glows with the power of death, I believe that this remained the same with her mother. As an Empyrean chosen by her own two fingers, for whatever reason, she chose to burn and become the death of the gods. Then she would take their skin and use it to create her godskin apostles. But all of this would come to an end when Malekith, her shadow, defeats her and seals Destined death away by plucking it out. As Finger Reader Enya tells us, this is the moment where the Golden Order began. But if we say Malekith, the leash functionality of the shadow, triggered, and then he defeated her, why is it that she suddenly was okay with that, and then he goes back to being loyal to her? Asking that question is what led me to making this video.
Hey Chadwick, welcome back in. Radagon.
I bet you thought I was forgetting about him in all this. Oh no. But I must admit, in the 2 years plus since Elden Ring was released, he does often go forgotten in my theorizing. As if the only things interesting about him in the lore is when he's linked to Marika's actions. But not anywhere as significant as the star of the show herself. To me, he's always just been that secondary alter ego to Marika who does her bidding and mistakenly falls into a cultish mindset with the Golden Order, which just won't allow him to let go of an era that's long ended. But I was wrong. It's him. And it's always been him. I don't know how I didn't see it until now. This is where the second theory was downloaded into my brain by the YouTube algorithm before I even knew there were videos made about it. When trying to consider how Radagon fits into the Melina Erdtree birth theory, I went over the attributes of Radagon in my head. My thoughts went something like this. Fire giants, red of hair, known to have giants among them that are short for their kind and not much taller than humans. They became friendly with sorcerers, and then it hit me. He is based on the mischievous Norse god.
You know, that's a good observation about Milos, which is so obvious. I can't believe in a way that I've missed it. Like, I'm like, okay, yeah, Milos is kind of like a giant pygmy, essentially. Or a pygmy giant. I don't know which way you want to make it an adjective. Either way, to say that they wouldn't be much taller than a human, I wonder if that's why some people say that Renala and Radon are giants or anything like that. But I just take it as a little bit of FromSoft being inconsistent with sizing and stuff, because that's a recurring theme throughout all of their games, that not always does the size truly correlate to the type of character that something is, because Ornstein and Smough can kind of grow based on powers of souls. Smough is kind of bigger than the Chosen Undead anyway, and yeah, it's pretty messy.
God, Loki. And he almost got away with it. You see, for some strange reason, when I began to side with the community's general agreement that Messmer is Marika's child, I linked all of the blasphemous aspects of him to Marika. I mean, she must be the cause of his attributes. She's the god of the lands between. Look at all of her other children. But that's where the bad habit of relegating Radagon to the position of pawn blinded me. Why did I assume that all of his quote-unquote blasphemous aspects must originate from her? Well, perhaps I thought it was an attempt to divest herself of all of the parts of herself that she didn't consider pure enough. She created, either intentionally or inadvertently, an alter ego that stored all of those aspects. But in hindsight, I don't think this was the case. Because Radagon is the one with the name that is an anagram of the Spanish word for female dragon. Radagon is the one who the misbegotten worship, which gives him a link to the Crucible. Radagon is the one with the red hair curse.
It is arguable as to whether or not the Misbegotten worship Radagon. Obviously, we do have the Misbegotten Crusader that has the Golden Order Fundamentalist greatsword there, but it's tenuous, though.
The Fire Giants. Radagon is the one obsessed with Golden Order fundamentalism. And it's Radagon who decides to marry Rennala and stop the war. And it's that last one that pushed me over the edge with the Loki theory. In Crunchy's video on Radagon, I learned of an interesting connection between Loki and Radagon, thanks to the Reddit post he showed and credited to the user Athena Dark. Loki was a giant who was responsible for the death of the Norse god Balder. He also had children with a giant called Angerboda who have similarities with the children Radagon had with Rennala. A god-devouring snake, a daughter who ruled the underworld, and a wolf who was destined to eat the sun.
Scalzi says, is there any evidence that Melina's eye is actually sealed? If you remember correctly, all we have is the mark on her face and she never opens it. So for what it's worth, I think that a lot of people tend to overlook what goes on with Melina's right eye, the one that isn't gloam colored at the end of the video. Let's look. Do I not? I probably have it labeled differently. Hold on. So when we look at Melina, a lot of people hyperfixate on the fact that her left eye is purple and that her scar doesn't look as dark anymore. Like, that's probably significant as well, but we don't exactly know how that is. But her right eye has lost all of its gold and is kind of dull and gray. And one other thing that's kind of interesting is when Godwyn gets stabbed and murdered in the story trailer, he has like this weird coloration kind of come out of his eye. So you can see it very gently go from like a somewhat goldish color to like a more gray color. So that might be related to Destined death or anything like that. So as to whether or not her eye is sealed, she never opens it. So in a literal sense, one can consider it sealed, even if it isn't actually sealed by Marika or something like that. So there is definitely room for disagreement about that. Good question, though.
Then you look at the now blasphemous snake Rykard, the now spirit form Ranni who stole fragments of Destined Death, and Radahn who halted the movement of the stars and fate and is a requirement to access the DLC with Miquella's hand. The very same Miquella who was obsessed with the eclipse. That DLC cannot come fast enough. But what else is Loki known for? Well, being a mischievous shapeshifter. I'll warn you now, this theory is about to go all the way off the rails.
The Shattering was Ragnarok.
Okay, so my next line of thinking was, the inspiration from Loki and his children probably doesn't exist as a one-off. There is likely more Norse inspiration for characters and themes in Elden Ring. And of course there was, which probably isn't news to a lot of you, and this has been covered in other videos and threads before. I do want to preface this by saying I do not believe the characters or the lore as a whole is entirely inspired by Norse mythology on its own. So, here are the connections I've made so far with my extremely limited understanding of Norse mythology. This section is going to be very long, but it is important to the theory and I just can't rush through it. As I've stated, I think Radagon is Loki. However, I think this is about as close to a one-to-one as we can get, other than maybe Rykard being the world-leading snake. The rest seem to blend, alter, or share attributes. I won't go over them all here, just the ones I think have the most importance in this theory. To start, while he's in a wolf, Radahn seems to be some combination of Fenrir and his children Skoll and Hati, beasts meant to eat the sun and moon. And in Elden Ring, instead of eating the sun and moon, he holds back the stars, Ranni's moon and fate, and is likely holding back the eclipse that Miquella seeks. Next, is Ranni, who in her spirit form after utilizing the Rune of Death seems to be inspired by Hel, the goddess who rules the underworld. But also possibly Hod. Hod is a Norse god associated with winter.
Oh, I thought he said hot as in like Ranni was attractive. I was like, huh? Hey, Platinum Ship, welcome back in.
The night and darkness, and is the god who was tricked into killing Balder. Ranni was trained by the Snow Witch Renna, has a connection to a dark moon. Her ending leaves the world in a chill night that encompasses all, and most importantly, is responsible for the death of Godwyn, who we'll return to later. However, I think this is unlikely, which I will also get into later. The trouble with Hod is, as the blind god who was tricked into killing Balder, there are two other characters that could potentially fit. The first of which is Melina, the only seemingly blind child of Marika. However, while she seems to be blind, she also is an accomplished warrior who doesn't seem like the type to be tricked simply as a result of her blindness. With her, the two Norse connections that come to mind as better fits are the warrior Valkyries and the god of warriors Tyr. The connection with Tyr comes from the legend where he loses his arm to Fenrir when the god attempts to imprison him. In the trailer where Melina fights Radahn, she can be seen reattaching her prosthetic arm before attacking him once more, only for Radahn to finally destroy it. The next relevant connection are Mikula and Torrent, who I think are partially inspired by Hermod, the god who traveled to the underworld to revive Balder, and Sleipnir, the eight-legged horse of Odin who was the child of Loki and a stallion. One thing that is a bit puzzling though is Mikula's possible connection to Balder. The more obvious connection, and the one I think is most likely, is that it is Godwyn who is Elden Ring's version of Balder. However, something significant about Balder is that he is beloved by all of the gods and is associated with light. Mikula is capable of compelling affection from seemingly everyone, and although he divests himself of his body and power, we are told in the story trailer that he once possessed golden flesh and blinding strength. This is why I don't think the Norse inspiration is meant to be one-to-one, even including the events of Ragnarok. However, the most relevant to the subject of this video is Godwyn. He, as I've just said, is most likely the Balder of Elden Ring. Let's go through this one with a quick summary of how Balder was killed. Balder was made
He was caught kissing underneath the mistletoe.
immortal after sharing with his mother, Frigg, that he had been having dreams of his impending death. Well, seemingly spurred on by jealousy of Balder, who was highly favored by all of the gods, Loki disguised himself as a woman and then asked Balder's mother, Frigg, if she'd left out anything when she made Balder immortal. She tells him she did. She left out mistletoe, as it was harmless. He then fashions an arrow or spear out of mistletoe, and then
So he forgot to mention like the way that Frigg made Balder immortal was by asking everybody and everything to promise to not harm Balder, and then she overlooked mistletoe. I think there might be two different accounts of this. One, she might have just overlooked it because she thought it was insignificant, or she just missed it entirely. I don't remember which is more canon. And yeah, so that's kind of relevant, and I'm sure he'll say the rest.
As all of the gods were amusing themselves, testing Balder's immortality, Loki tricks one of these gods into hitting Balder with his spear or arrow, killing him. They then try to revive him by sending another of Odin's sons, Hermod, down the World Tree while riding Odin's spirit horse, Sleipnir, to its dark and damp roots. They do this to ask Hel to revive him. She says she will if everyone cries for him and mourns for him. And so, everyone does. Except for a goddess who is of course Loki in disguise. And so, he stays dead. Okay, so what does this have to do with Elden Ring? And if Radagon is Loki, and Ranni is Hel, and Godwyn is Balder, then how does this jealousy Loki had for Balder express itself in Elden Ring?
Radagon is not Marika.
Let's listen to some of the most interesting dialogue concerning Marika and Radagon's union in the game.
In Marika's own words, O Radagon, leal hound of the Golden Order, thou art yet to become me. Thou art yet to become a god. Let us be shattered, both, mine other self.
The most contentious debate in the community often comes from the first part of that dialogue. Thou art yet to become me, thou art yet to become a god. People often use this in debates regarding whether or not Radagon and Marika were always one, became one, were one then split, and so on. But what is often not considered in these debates is the context provided by the very next line. Shattering together.
I agree.
This dialogue implies that this conversation is happening right before she shatters the Elden Ring. We already know that they share a body as this is happening. We see it in a cutscene art, we see it in trailers. This would mean that they are currently in one body, but Radagon is yet to become her and has yet to become a god? Well, how can that be? It's often assumed that if they share a body, then they should also share their nature. However, clearly this isn't the case. So what gives? Well, in my last lore video, I made the mistake of connecting the Radagon female dragon anagram and the potential for this to also represent snakes to Marika and her true nature. However, I think there is a reason this is Radagon's name. I no longer think that the seduction and betrayal at the start of Gold and Shadow was Marika's doing. I believe it was Radagon's before they were one, and I believe the form he took when seducing and betraying was that of Marika's, but not actually Marika. Let me explain. After being defeated by Malekith, why does it seem like Marika gets right on board with the Golden Order and back on good terms with Malekith? I think that this may be because it wasn't just the Rune of Death that was sealed.
And of course, that's implying that Marika would be the Glomide Queen in this theory right here, if anybody was a little bit confused by that.
I think that this may be because it wasn't just the Rune of Death that was sealed, but also a part of her soul along with it, and through some yet unknown means, Radagon possessed her body. This section is quite a bit heavier on the speculation side. Firstly, I think the concept of the eye representing the soul may play a part in why the Shattering takes place after Godwyn's death. All throughout the lore of the game, you can find evidence of Marika's cruelty. Whether it's the Omen, the Misbegotten, the Fire Giants, her illegitimate children who amount to nothing of note, and so on. However, her other half, Radagon, is a renowned hero who is worshipped by the Misbegotten, inspiring to both Radahn and Miquella, and is loved by the likes of his once enemy, Rennala. But he's still only a mere champion as stated by Miriel, Pastor of Vows. And yet, he came to Liurnia already at the head of the Golden Order's army. And when Godfrey was hounded from the lands between, he is then seated as the Elden Lord. Now, it's easy to think, well, he's Marika. She just put herself on both seats of power. However, let's look at how it was discovered that Radagon is Marika. We look at a giant statue of Radagon doing the classic T-pose and cast the Law of Regression. Then, a noticeably smaller statue of Marika appears, in that same pose we see of her at the end of the game, with that same flowing... Well, what is that behind her? Well, while there are many theories about that, I'm going to posit that this is a snake. A snake that's controlling
It's very clearly a shawl.
her. Look at her pose again. It's almost as if her arms are being held up, like she's being...
Alright, let's go ahead and pull up the pose. Is it not in this one? No, it's in the actual game opening. Whoops, okay. Opening. Yeah, so this is very clearly her dress slash shawl. Actually, it looks like it's all part of her dress, essentially, but it's certainly not a snake, and just wanted to have the pose up since he didn't have it on the screen right there. Hey, Rachel Rogers, welcome back into the stream. Nice to see you again.
puppeteered, just like the Abductor Virgins, who I think are representations of the Glomide Queen.
I don't know about that. Like, I get that. I do kind of like this idea right here, but it's not like the so-called arms of the virgins are that way. If anything, this this might be a cursed thought, but this could be her legs. Hey, Zero, nice to see you again.
As stated in my last lore video, think about the incantation we just cast. It's an incantation created by Golden Order fundamentalists. Of the two, Radagon is the one quoted as being a Golden Order fundamentalist. Why is it that when the statue is regressing, it's not going from the god of the lands between to our Elden Lord, but the other way around? Well, that's because Radagon is Marika. That is the order of priority in their union. He has his hands on the wheel. He's the one manipulating Marika into doing his bidding.
That's a little bit unfortunate. As far as the Japanese is concerned, it's kind of got the other implication, which isn't to say that the English is placing it one way or the other, because there's some ambiguity there. Marika is Radagon? No, Radagon is Marika. Bro, what is it? Oh, do I not have the quotes of this here? I think I have the Japanese version footage. I might not. No, I just have it in slow-mo. Although this might help me. Radagon is America. Okay, so it's not on this. I'm going to have to open up the Karian archive. Okay, so when we go look at Radagon is America right here, it's very, cut and dry. Radagon is America. The Japanese for it is... Did I just lose it? Radagon to wa Marika de aru. So de aru is like to be, exists. So this towa is kind of a way to explain what something is. It's almost like a quote, but it's almost like that which is. So that which is Radagon is America. So it's very clear to me in the Japanese text, at least, that which is Radagon is America. So America is Radagon. So I don't really have too much of a problem with the localization. This is kind of one of those ones that's splitting hairs, but it's unfortunate because when we look at the lore, all we do is split hairs. So it's no surprise that people might get the opposite conclusion from that, because A equals B, so B equals A. It's just kind of one of the ambiguities of English.
However, she is able to shadow the Elden Ring. So what changed? During the Shattering, they very clearly have opposing wills, and Radagon loses that battle. Well, circling back to the sealing of the Rune of Death and perhaps a part of Marika's soul, there is an event right before the Shattering that could account for this. The Night of the Black Knives. On this night, pieces of the Rune of Death are used to kill Godwin's body, meaning, at least for a time, the Rune of Death is unsealed. But why? And why is it Radagon's daughter that is involved with this? Well, as Loki and Hel are the reason Baldur is dead and stayed dead, the same may be the case for their Elden Ring counterparts. You see, Godwin was the literal golden boy, the hero who conquered the dragons, the demigod who inherited the line of gold, the brother that Mikola loved so much that he was willing to divest himself of his body and power to try to revive him. Even some of the dragons he defeated grew to love him so much that even in death, they stayed loyal to him. And as the demigods would go on to fight over the right to become Elden Lord, it's highly likely that this station was Godwin's birthright, and Radagon could not have that. So he conspired with his Empyrean daughter, perhaps by tricking her with the prospect of freeing her from her Empyrean fate, to kill him, which, unintentionally, was his undoing. As this only follows from the logic of this Norse framework, I understand if anyone sees this as a bit too large of a speculative leap. However, I think I can make the case for this a bit stronger as we go further into this theory. Now, what follows from the Rune of Death being unsealed in this theory is that with it, the part of Marika that existed when she was the Glowmine Queen was also unsealed. And rather than shatter the Elden Ring in grief, she does this as a sacrifice to stop Radagon.
Uh-oh. What did I do? That's weird. I'll need to think about that again. I want to re-listen to that point you just made. Teen Sith asks, did she miss where he linked the Gex stuff and back to Messmer and the Shattering? No, he hasn't gotten back to Messmer and the Shattering. I was just wondering that myself. True connoisseur message retracted. Uh-oh. Chadwick said, he sees too many references to mirrored halves and chirality. I'm not sure how to pronounce that. Left hand and right hand versions of the same thing. You sometimes wonder if we were overthinking these ideas way too much. I mean, we've only been doing this for months. Why on earth would you think we're overthinking things? That's crazy, bro. If anything, we're underthinking it.
The hero who conquered the dragons, the demigod who inherited the line of gold, the brother that Mikola loved so much that he was willing to divest himself of his body and power to try to revive him. Even some of the dragons he defeated grew to love him so much that even in death, they stayed loyal to him. And as the demigods would go on to fight over the right to become Elden Lord, it's highly likely that this station was Godwin's birthright, and Radagon could not have that.
Goblins.
So he conspired with his Empyrean daughter, perhaps by tricking her with the prospect of freeing her from her Empyrean fate, to kill him, which, unintentionally, was his undoing. As this only follows from the logic of this Norse framework, I understand if anyone sees this as a bit too large of a speculative leap. However, I think I can make the case for this a bit stronger as we go further into this theory. Now, what follows from the Rune of Death being unsealed in this theory is that with it, the part of Marika that existed when she was the Glowmite Queen was also unsealed. And rather than shatter the Elden Ring in grief, she does this as a sacrifice to stop Radagon.
What does he... I don't think I'm following that last part on, or that last part fully.
Being unsealed in this theory is that with it, the part of Marika that existed when she was the Glowmite Queen was also unsealed. And rather than shatter the Elden Ring in grief, she does this as a sacrifice to stop Radagon.
Oh, okay. You just kind of got two different ideas there. So, it to me, I might be wrong about this. It sounds like the part of her that was sealed is a reference to Melina in this framework, and that's kind of divorced from shattering the Elden Ring, and she's shattering the Elden Ring purely to stop Radagon. Although, anyway, I'll just play the video. Our Tarnished is a demigod.
A quick tangent here. We learned that Marika, before taking Radagon as her consort, banishes Godfrey and all of the Tarnished. It seems as though this was a plan meant to strengthen them in order to bring them back to the Lands Between, and for one of them to become an Elden Lord. But was this truly all there is to it? I really don't think so, because in order for this plan to work, the Shattering and her eventual death at the hand of one of these Tarnished would have to happen, which is quite a lot to give up without an extremely important reason. In the 1.0 version of the game, which of course should be taken with a grain of salt in most cases as it is now cut content, the Limgrave East map description reads, Radagon's warning is yet told.
I do love how it was called the region of Tenebrae at this point of the game, because Tenebrae is the Latin term for... Wait. What's the difference between Tenebrae and Nox? Tenebrae etymology. Latin literally darkness, so Nox is night. Okay, so Tenebrae means darkness, and of course with the Land of Shadow, it does make me wonder if it was supposed to have some tangential connection to the Land of Shadow before the game's release. Thanks, iMan, appreciate that. Teen Sith, you say smocking guns are everywhere for those with eyes to see? Truly, what we are lacking is eyes on the inside, because we are on the basest of planes. Darth Tenebris is a Star Wars reference confirmed? Yeah. Okay.
And retold that one day, the Tarnished led into war will cross the Sea of Fog and return. The use of the word warning leads me to believe he was implying that, of course, this wasn't a good thing. It would make sense that he would say this when we consider that he's the one blocking all Tarnished from entering the Erdtree, and once we enter, he attacks us. All that to say, I think that the Tarnished were actually sent away to gain the strength to stop Radagon specifically. A quick side note on a quick tangent, I am now on the side of people who think that Radagon tricked Gideon into believing that he discovered Mark as well. But you read the title of the section. How did I get there? Well, in Norse mythology, after Baldur is killed, Odin has a child with either a giant or a human that is born to do one thing and one thing only: avenge Baldur's death and kill Hod and Loki. His name was Vali. After his birth, he rapidly grows in size and strength and accomplishes his goal in only one day. Does that sound familiar? Well, perhaps on its own that's not so convincing. There was a video recently released covering a theory in the Japanese Elden Ring community that posits that the Tarnished we play as is a demigod. I'll leave a link to the video in the description, but the gist of the theory is that very silently while a Tarnished is being revived, you can hear the bells of a mausoleum and a baby's cry in the background. I am going to suggest a crazy theory. Our Tarnished is actually the Elden Ring version of Vali. Think about how quickly, after being the first Tarnished brought to the Land Between in a very long time, we're able to grow strong enough to become the Elden Lord. And in order to do so, we have to kill the Loki of Elden Ring, Radagon. But, of course, there's still the Hod of Elden Ring that we have to deal with as well. We'll get to that in a bit.
Marika's sacrifice.
To get back on track, let's again listen to what Marika says to Radagon.
In Marika's own words, O Radagon, leal hound of the Golden Order, thou art yet to become me. Thou art yet to become a god. Let us be shattered, both. Mine other self.
If Radagon is not her and is not a god when the shattering happens, why does she use the word yet? She's about to shatter their body.
Oh man, I almost brought this up earlier in the story, but I didn't. So, one of the issues with using the word yet, I actually already have it pulled up, is the Japanese word for it, mada, doesn't necessarily always mean yet. It can mean still, or not yet. So, when she says, thou art not a god, wait, not yet a god, that's right. Why can't I find the dialogue? Thou art. Oh. Thou art yet to become me, thou art yet to become a god. So, let me make this bigger. Alright, thou art yet to become me, thou art yet to become a god. Omae wa mada watashi de wa nai. So, you are not yet me. You are still not me. Still not a god or not yet a god. So, I don't really blame the localizers for going with not yet, but unfortunately with the English, that does have to therefore imply another change in state that he has not met, but he potentially could. Whereas the Japanese doesn't have to be read that way. So, this isn't to say that yet is a wrong choice, but there might be a caveat that it may not meant to be understood quite that way. So, the way that Marika's rebuking him, I do get the sense that it's meant more in the sense of still, though, rather than yet. But that's just kind of my interpretation, which I mean interpretation in, like, the individual sense rather than, like, a pure localization linguistic hang-up sense. Hopefully that makes sense.
Body and weaken the Elden Ring. Where would the opportunity for the yet come to fruition? Well, I think what she means here is that Radagon has not succeeded in becoming her, or a god, yet. And because of this, she is capable of stopping him. And she does. And as a result, it is implied that she is imprisoned by the greater will for doing this. And yet, she doesn't lose the vision or power granted to her by the greater will. Why? And why is it that Radagon, who was immediately punished after his death by the Elden Beast, presumably for holding up the transition to a new era of order, can freely move? Somehow, I never really paid much mind to the obvious inspiration drawn from Jesus' sacrifice on the cross, with the pose Mark is in at the end of the game. She even has a spear in her side. I've also learned that in Norse mythology, there is quite clearly some inspiration from Odin, who stabs himself with a spear and hangs himself up from the tree, just like this. And, like Odin, I believe she did this to herself. But why?
Something that can easily go unnoticed is not only does Radagon have the ability to come down from the rune arc-like imprisonment, but the spear disappears.
Another point is when Odin stabbed himself onto the tree, he gained the power of runes, which may or may not have a thematic connection to Marika and the Erdtree and Grace and the giving of runes and bestowing that power upon Tarnished. So, Chadwick said the usage of the English become does a lot of interpretive work there. Let me double check it. Thou art yet to become a god? Oh, yeah, that's true. Yeah, I didn't even think about that. That is a very fair thing to bring up because there isn't quite anything as firm as become in the Japanese text. But to be fair, because Japanese is a high context language, it's not impossible to come to that kind of reading just looking at this on its own, though. And of course, we never know if the translators at Frog Nation had more context that we don't, or whether or not lines got changed or updated. So anyway, I do appreciate that comment as well, Chadwick. Hey, Potato Poker, welcome back in. How you doing?
And we never see him take it out. He lands, picks up Marika's hammer, and then proceeds to try to stop us from supplanting him. And when we defeat him, he's simply punished and turned into a weapon to be used as we fight the Elden Beast. However, it's clear that the Greater Will still valued Marika, at least enough in her imprisonment to keep her in the station of God over the other demigods, who we learn while playing have been given up on by the Greater Will. This includes Miquella, Melina, and Ranni, the only Empyreans who can replace her. So, again, why can Radagon move and Marika can't? Well, that's because I don't think that the rune arc holding Marika in that pose was actually part of her imprisonment. Why? Well, if Radagon can move, while he might want to prevent people from entering the Erdtree, why doesn't he leave? Why was someone attempting to burn down the Erdtree to enter? He could leave, reacquire the shattered bits of the Elden Ring from his children and mend himself, and perhaps if that spear actually did more than just harm Marika, he could fully take her place. But he doesn't. And that's because he can't. Because the imprisonment does actually apply to him. The rune arc and the spear were part of Marika's plan during the Shattering. But again, why? Well, as I just previously mentioned,
If he's implying that the rune arc is keeping Radagon sealed, I think that's a pretty neat idea that I haven't heard, which I can appreciate, even if I don't really have too strong feelings one way or another about it. The other thing that I was going to mention... Oh yeah, part of the reason why Radagon may not have even wanted to leave the Erdtree is because if he keeps it sealed permanently, then he would permanently be the Elden Lord. It's essentially his kind of big-ass security blanket that prevents the monsters, aka the Tarnished, from getting him as well.
in Norse mythology, Odin sacrifices his eye, is hung from a branch of the World Tree for 9 days and nights, and he stabs himself with a spear. And he does all this in an attempt to gain divine knowledge and wisdom. I think Marika may have done this for a similar reason. However, I think this is something we won't know until the DLC comes out. But what does this and everything else we've talked about have to do with Messmer? Well, let's get into the final section of this theory.
Messmer the Impaler.
Most of this theory so far was meant to illustrate the idea that it's been Radagon pulling the strings. He's the deceiver snake, the shape-shifting female dragon, the one puppeteering the Glowmite Queen. But what is the importance of all this? Well, let's go back to the beginning of the story of Elden Ring and this theory. In the beginning, as kindly Miquella found out, there was a seduction and a betrayal, an affair from which gold arose, and so too was Shadow born. I think Radagon is the seducer. However, who was being seduced, who was being betrayed, I think we'll know for sure in the DLC. However, I think I have an idea of what Miquella meant when he spoke of how gold and shadow came to be. Earlier in this theory I spoke of Melina, and how I now believe her birth was like that of Millicent's, spawned as a result of Marika sprouting the Erdtree, the golden tree. But we now know that along with gold came shadow, and along with the Erdtree came the Skadu tree. If Melina
Oh no, he may have unironically used the hard C.
is to Marika what Millicent is to Melina, then who was born with the Erdtree? Well, in the story trailer for the DLC, we learn that what follows the birth of Golden Shadow is a war unseen, seemingly spearheaded by Messmer. I think that with the sprouting of the Erdtree came the birth of Messmer. And as Melina is made in the likeness of Marika, Messmer was made in the likeness of Radagon. But wait, I hear you say to your screen. Messmer is all but confirmed to be the child of Marika. He even speaks of his mother being able to sanction a lord. But this is where the Radagon Loki inspiration comes in. Remember, when Baldur is killed and the only way to bring him back was to get everyone to cry for him, Loki shapeshifted into the form of a different goddess and refused to cry. And in Elden Ring, with his name being an anagram for the Spanish word for female dragon, Radagon's version of shapeshifting is to literally take control of Marika while in her body. And from there, it doesn't take too much to connect the rest. The red hair, the dragon communion eye, the snakes, his height. This is an expression of Radagon. In a way, Messmer is Radagon's child, but also, he is what Radagon is.
So there was a point earlier in the video where he said, like, the DLC needs to come out. So this might have come out, like, what, a week before that? June 21st. So this is like a couple days, 4 days. 2 days. Okay, so he didn't understand the significance of Messmer's eye there. So, okay, I'm going to back up the theory a little bit just to remember what he said, and then I'll rant about it. But before that, Yo Theros, welcome into the stream. I appreciated your inclusion in the Dark Souls trilogy. Except for your damn lockstones.
The snakes, his height. This is an expression while in her body. And from there, it doesn't take too much to connect the rest. The red hair, the dragon communion eye, the snakes, his height. This is an expression of Radagon. In a way, Messmer is Radagon's child, but also, he is what Radagon is. And that is why I also think that we'll learn along with Mikkel in the DLC that this unseen war wasn't truly Marika's deed. It was Radagon's. And then we must ask, why is all of this hidden?
So yeah, it's a little bit unfortunate that this came out only a couple days before the DLC, because you'll learn that Messmer doesn't exactly have a snake/dragon eye as much as it is a seal of Marika. And I think that the DLC really does strongly imply that he is indeed her child. And I know he kind of addressed this a moment ago, but I just think it got reinforced with the DLC. So I might talk about this more, but there's only a tiny bit left.
And why does it seem as if Messmer is now in rebellion from the Golden Order? Well, let's look back once more at Baldur's death. He was killed when Hod was tricked into hitting Baldur with mistletoe. Mistletoe that had been fashioned into either an arrow or a spear. I believe the one-eyed Messmer isn't called the Impaler because of his deeds in the Land of Shadow. I think he gained that name, along with making snakes blasphemous in the lands between, by impaling Godwin. But
yeah, and I think that's partially because a tragedy didn't know the timeline of events of the Crusade. So I think that's kind of why that doesn't work, because the Crusade essentially happened sometime after the Carians came into power with the rise of the Erdtree forces, or after the union between them, but it seems to have happened well before the Night of the Black Knives at the very least.
that's a problem. We already know it's ultimately the Black Knife Assassins who kill Godwin's body on the Night of the Black Knives. But even with weapons that can kill a demigod, how did they actually defeat the demigod who defeated the dragons? Well, I am almost certain that by the end of our battles in the Land of Shadow, Messmer will give us that answer. And that's the end of this one.
Rip. That sucks. I mean, I definitely appreciate going in with the bold predictions on the eve, or the cusp of the eve of the DLC.
I hope this was entertaining and maybe gave some fuel to people working on their own lore frameworks. If you enjoyed this video and would like to see more lore theories in between my animations, please like, comment, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. Special thanks to those supporting me on Patreon, and please feel free to come back and tell me how wrong I was when the DLC releases. Peace.
Hey, Methoda, nice to see you again. Do I have any old videos that lost a lot of validity after the DLC came out? So I think I could probably say that my theory that the Erdtree is the Crucible might need some work. Still not sure if it's entirely wrong, which, is maybe partly me being stubborn, and it may also partly just be because of some of the oddities with the item descriptions that I can't let go, because it's very frustrating to have item descriptions which may seem to be contradicted elsewhere, or if certain things are supposed to be referenced in a figurative way, and I was trying to interpret them literally because, I mean, how is one truly supposed to discern the difference between the two if there isn't enough context to make things clear? So obviously that video may have suffered a bit, but to be fair, I also was saying this might be my headcanon that gets upended right before the DLC drops, so that one might not be super great. I think my first video talking about whether or not there is a great tree and whether or not that great tree is the Erdtree might be impacted, but I don't know. That's something I'm still trying to reconcile. The existence of the Shadow Tree as the shadow of the Erdtree, as well as the potential for another tree to have existed before those two, is something that even now I'm still mulling over. So I can't definitively say how right or wrong I am until I'm kind of fully committed and willing to give a proper answer to some of that crazy speculation I offered before. But that's a good question. Although, let me look at some of my old videos. There's probably another. Although, to be fair, I try to be as close to the text as possible and only offer theories that I think the text can support, which isn't to say that they are factually accurate as much as they are possible based on the information at hand. So, oh, maybe my timeline stream? I don't know. Oh yeah, my Stormlord videos. Those are all always a big question mark. Okay. So, despite everything, I did enjoy this video. It was very little about Messmer, and now knowing that it came out before the DLC kind of makes me ease up on disliking it immediately, and it was honestly a lot more grounded than I was expecting just reading the title alone. Teen Sith, you can't tell if you're good at research, logicking, or if you're good at picking irrelevant topics based on how little you're really needing to revise. So for me, I don't really feel like I need to revise a lot. I'm just trying to fit the square peg into the round hole, and that feels a little bit difficult. So honestly, my only biggest hang up is pretty much everything relating to the Crucible, which is kind of a big deal, but also might not be. It's a thing. Okay. Oh yeah, so I've gone ahead and linked a Tragedies video to you guys in the chat if you want to give them some support. So I know we're going to potentially watch another video at the end of their stream, but I want to see what else they have. Ooh, not a whole lot of FromSoft stuff yet. So I will hold off on subbing just yet until maybe we see that next one. So, okay, let's go ahead and check out Fat Brett's the horrific truth behind Marika's Godhood. We've definitely watched a couple videos by Fat Brett before.
I think the greatest mystery remaining in Marika's story is this. What did she really do at the Gate of Divinity? Or, much more importantly, what do the writers and
She spilled the Kool-Aid. That's why it's all messy over there. Let me try to fix the YouTube frame rate bullcrap again.
I think the greatest mystery remaining in Marika's story is this. What did she really do at the Gate of Divinity? Or, much more importantly, what do the writers and developers of Elden Ring want their audience to believe happened at the Gate of Divinity? How do they want their audience to react to what we are shown here? And how does this connect to the larger themes of the story, like the dangers of total power, or the stagnation and decay that results from immortality? What we're
Bingo! He said stagnation.
going to do in this video is examine Marika's ascendance to godhood, how it is presented to the audience, and figure out what the writers are trying to accomplish. Let's start with, what is the Gate of Divinity? We know for sure that it is the location where Marika became a god. We know this because Ansbach says so pretty explicitly in his dialogue. We also know that Miquella's goal is to perform some sort of secret rite at this same location, that this is where his new age of kindness will begin. We are told that by both Ansbach and Letta, and from the description of the secret rite scroll. And
Hey, Global Sequence and PC, welcome back into the stream, guys.
that's just about all of the objective information the game tells us about the gate. It's not a lot to work with. We can tell that the writers are presenting this location as something very special and very rare, a site of powerful magic. However,
I just had a hell of a weird idea. Hold on.
a lot to work with.
I don't like it, but I'll share it anyway. So seeing like the weird lines coming in and out of the Divine Gate kind of reminded me of a moment of the tapeworm looking like things surrounding the statues of the two figures throughout Aenear Limb. And then I was like, wait a second. We have two figures over here. They've got the weird tapeworm looking like thing, although it doesn't really look like that. Could the statues down below the other parts of Aenear Limb be depicting what would go on to become this? And then was this broken at some point? And was this one person and another? And is that supposed to represent Marika and Radagon? It's a neat idea. I don't think that, works super well with what we see in the story trailer, which is always annoying, but I was wondering if the purpose of the Divine Gate is to just merge two souls into one body, which could potentially explain Marika/Radagon's situation and Miquella/Radon's/Mohg's situation. But I don't know, man.
We can tell that the writers are presenting this location as something very special and very...
Like, why would Marika and Radagon need to sacrifice a bazillion people to become one?
Can tell that the writers are presenting this location as something very special and very rare, a site of powerful magic. However, the writers never explain why. Why is the Gate of Divinity so special? Why does it contain this power? Who constructed it, and why did they construct it? And how and when? While we will discuss some possible answers to those questions in this video, something that is important to note is that whenever you are analyzing a story and you come across a question that the narrative does not provide any solid answer for, there are basically two possibilities. The first is that the writers of that story are bad at writing, and they have made a mistake and accidentally left a frustrating plot hole. The second is that the writers left that question unanswered on purpose, maybe because they want their audience to engage with the story in a creative or active way, to use their imagination and reason to come up with their own answers, which is definitely something FromSoftware does a lot of in their games. Or maybe the writers are indicating to the audience which questions actually matter. They don't answer it because getting bogged down in those irrelevant details would distract from whatever they're actually trying to accomplish, whatever theme or emotion or idea or whatever they are trying to communicate to the audience. So I think that the writers of Elden Ring do not explain what exactly the Gate of Divinity is, or exactly how it works, or even exactly what Marika did there, because those questions don't matter. Instead, what really matters, and what they do show us very clearly, are the consequences of what Marika did there. I have said it multiple times in videos now. Elden Ring is a story about power, about who wields power and what they do with that power. With that in mind, the really important question is, what do the events at the Gate of Divinity, or more specifically the consequences of those events, tell us about power? And the answer is, nothing good. Elden Ring was already a story filled with tons of examples of power being used to inflict violence and pain and suffering and death upon the population at a massive scale. Its destructive touch reaches everywhere and everyone. Those who deserve it and those who don't are affected equally. In the base game, we see the misbegotten servants get mistreated at Castle Morn, and then indiscriminately slaughter every single human they can get their hands on in retaliation when they revolt. Even people like Arena, who doesn't seem to have done anything wrong. In that example, we see violence cascade out of control, destroying everything in sight. We see the remnants of terrible battles all across the lands between, where broken husks of former soldiers still wander aimlessly. Battles that devastated the land, that led to nothing but stalemate, that accomplished nothing besides further destruction. But all the while, there's this suggestion that all this suffering is really a result of the shattering of the Elden Ring and the civil war between the demigods that followed. Once upon a time, in the age of the Erdtree, things were supposedly good here. The Erdtree was not just a font of incredible power, but of magical healing blessings. As a result of those blessings, the people here lived in golden splendor and whimsy. It seems possible that we could return to that time. If only our player character, the Tarnished, can become Elden Lord, we could set everything right again. Restore the Elden Ring, restore the Golden Order, or maybe even make it better than it was before with one of the mending runes. If that is true, it would suggest that, thematically, maybe power is not so bad after all. Maybe
He did say if that is true, so I'll keep that in mind, but it is kind of dissatisfying that the, default ending is an Age of Fracture, although to be fair, you don't get Miquella's rune in the base ending, so maybe that's why it's fractured. Methoda said I could do a stream reacting to my own old videos, giving additional commentary, seeing how my opinions have evolved. So if you are interested in that, on the 1st of this month, I did react to my Frenzied Flame video, and I explained why it was an April Fool's video. But I've thought about doing stuff like that in the past. I don't know, it almost feels a little bit too too much like self-winkery for me to really want to do with that. But if a lot of people are interested in it, I might consider doing it someday. And there's a lot of stuff that I still want to cover, but it's just one of those things where it feels a lot easier to talk about things and spitball them in the realm of the streams versus another of making a more polished, developed video where I tend to focus on brevity and trying to condense as much information down as possible in as few words as possible, which can be a good and a bad thing, because I've definitely seen comments on some of my videos that are like, man, this is too much information. I need to watch these at a slower speed. Can you put more space between your points and stuff? And I'm like, well, that's probably fair. And I have gotten better at putting more space between thoughts, but it's just, oftentimes there's so much I need to set up before I can even make a payoff that I don't know I can truly win at the end of the day. Scaleezy said maybe Godwin was Ronnie's other half, or to take the marriage theory further, he was destined to be Ronnie's other half. I've wondered stuff like that before, because it's very weird that both died at the same time, considering the depictions we have of Godwin's death and no Ronnie around at all. That does bother me quite a bit. Were they telepathically connected then? Was she kind of subservient to Godwin in some way? Was she the oldest Karian daughter and he the oldest Lu son, and therefore they were kind of betrothed to each other forcefully in their regal manners? And she's like, no, bro. But Teen Sith really does not personally like the Godwin betrothal theory. I mean, you're fine to disagree with people. even I'm not like the biggest fan of it, but I'm just trying to make sense of what's there, and sometimes that leads you into grasping at straws and trying to make it work.
If the right character is in charge, power can be used to make this world a better place. Just like Marika did with the Erdtree back at the beginning of all this, before everything went wrong. And then comes the Shadow of the Erdtree expansion and Marika's new backstory, like a bull in a china shop, to smash those assumptions to pieces. I think that the inclusion of the story of the Gate of Divinity is meant to show the audience that no, everything was broken right from the very first moment. There is no idealized age of innocence for us to return to. This was always a world founded on violence. Power was always corrupt and corrosive. Now, I just made a lot of claims about the thematic purpose of the Gate of Divinity. And going forward for the rest of this video, it is my job to back those claims up with textual evidence. So to begin with, let's take a closer look at the visual design of the Gate of Divinity itself. What are the developers trying to communicate to us through that design? Okay, the gate rests atop the summit of the massive spiraling Belurot Tower, a shining white tower that stretches high up into the sky. I've said before that I think this tower was inspired by the story of the Tower of Babel, which is usually interpreted as a story about the arrogance of mankind, attempting to build a monument that can compete with the brilliance of the heavens themselves. In that story, that arrogant construction is halted when God himself intercedes. In the world of Elden Ring, there was no god there to humble them, so the Hornsent appear to have successfully built a tower that can reach the heavens themselves. And so, the Gate of Divinity is meant to be a very literal gate to heaven. Step through and you might just arrive in paradise. An interesting question is, was the gate already here before Marika showed up?
Yeah, so I definitely appreciate Fat Brett's framing of things right there. Hey Stella, welcome back in. How you doing tonight? So one of the other things that I want to bring up in relation to essentially reaching quote-unquote heaven with the Divine Tower Gate, I think that should naturally raise questions of what exactly is heaven, or, you know, the celestial heavens in Elden Ring. With everything that we've known of the Greater Will, one would perhaps think that this should have a connection to the Greater Will, and then maybe it does. Maybe it doesn't. Does this have any relation to like where souls come from and fate? But it seems like the souls and stuff and fate were tied to the stars at one point in time, and that changed with the order of the Erdtree fettering the fate in the night sky with the marriage to Renala and whatnot. So the fettering of the moon with the golden order, all that kind of stuff. So anyway, I'm not entirely sure what to make of the Divine Gate despite this framing here.
How long has it stood at the summit of the tower? Was Marika the first person to step through its portal? And if not, how many others have done so? Where are those people? Did they ascend to Godhood too? Well, I think we can find the answer to those questions if we can find the answer to another question, which is, what material is the gate composed of? Do the developers want us to believe that this gate is composed of just regular stone, or are we meant to believe that it was built out of something else? Alright, to answer that question, let's start with the imagery in the Shadow of the Erdtree story trailer. Looking at the gate as it is being portrayed in this scene, can you see any stone anywhere in this shot? Because I cannot. All I see are corpses. I see a gate built out of a mountain of blood and flesh and viscera. But what about in the game itself? Our player character can reach the Gate of Divinity in the present, and from a distance, it does look like solid stone, right? Well, let's take a closer look to be sure. You can see all of these thousands of corpses that seem to be rising and reaching out of the material that the gate is composed of. And if you zoom in really close, you can see that nearly its entire surface is made up of these imprints of skeletal bodies. This leads me to believe that the intention is that this gate was not built out of stone, but entirely out of petrified corpses. blood and viscera that was smashed together and then carved up into the shape of a crude gate, and then later turned to stone. It is notable that the gate's visual design is very different than the rest of the surrounding architecture. All of the other stonework around the tower is designed in an ornate, classical, elegant style, whereas the gate is very rough and misshapen. I think that, with these differences in design, the developers are suggesting that the tower and gate were built at different times by different methods with different compositions by different people. The gate
And I think one interesting question would be then, if the Divine Gate was built at a different time, was it moved to the top of the tower? Or was the tower, like, built up underneath it? Was it raised like crazy magic? That's a possibility because we have a crazy magic world. But anyway, PC, you were saying you don't get the sense that the Hornsent religion is built around the greater will, unlike the other religions in the game. Yeah, I don't entirely get that sense either, which also raises the question to me then, if they are supposed to be trying to raise a divinity that's separate from the greater will, then what kind of divinity is that? Especially because we only ever see Marika divine in context or in relation to the Elden Ring, because she is the vision of the vessel, essentially, or the vessel of the vision, rather.
gate was not carved slowly over time by master Hornsent stoneworkers like the rest of the tower. Instead, it was built quickly without any regard for elegance or decoration. The gate's design is purely functional. Some fans have speculated that the tower itself may be composed of corpses as well, because you can find these spots where the columns have begun to collapse or disintegrate. And
yeah, I'm glad he brought that up, because I was putting that one in my pocket to bring up. So I don't entirely know how I feel about the tower itself being created from the corpses. I definitely see the attraction from that, from looking at these kind of like crumbling pillars, for sure. But these pillars don't exactly look like these guys, so maybe there's meant to be a difference, maybe not. Maybe they just paid more attention to detail and things didn't go right on a pillar like this one.
there are petrified corpses clinging to the sides, though you do not.
And some of the things about like the way the debris floats off of them, I think is visually reminiscent of the Erdtree. So then does that bring up questions as to whether or not the Gate of Divinity had any relation to the creation of the Erdtree? And based off of the story trailer, it seems like that should be the case, but there's a lot of awful timeline questions that get brought up in relation to that, because the scene with Marika at the beginning, did that come way, way, way before the stuff with Messmer, or was it around the same time? It's left purposely vague.
See the same skeletal imprint texture as on the gate, but I'm getting lost in the little details here. It does not really matter if both the tower and the gate are composed of petrified corpses, because the dramatic differences in outward appearance, the elegance versus roughness, still suggest a difference in method and purpose. But let's rewind a bit. Remember, the whole point of this very long digression was to answer the question, do the developers want their audience to believe that this gate was already here when Marika showed up, or do they want us to believe something else? And more importantly, what does that reveal about her characterization? And no, I do not think the gate was already here. You can see in the story trailer that all of these corpses were fresh, recently killed, only recently assembled into this shape. And the only character around is Marika, which means that she must have slaughtered all of these people. She must have arranged their corpses in this shape. There's just no one else here who could be responsible for it. If the developers wanted us to believe otherwise, they would have shown us those other characters, but they don't. They only show us Marika. So she did not co-opt some.
I don't entirely know how fair this kind of reasoning is, and I don't think this is like actually a problem or a slight against Fat Brett's reasoning here. As much as it is, I don't know how trustworthy some of these out-of-game cinematics truly are meant to be, because as I constantly bring up nowadays, we don't ever see Ronnie brought up in conjunction with Godwin, and the reason for that is obviously she's a redheaded stepchild, so nobody cares about her, but one would hope that there should have been more going on with those cutscenes, or even like this cinematic concept art to suggest more of a connection between the two. And so it certainly would have been nice to know if we have Hoarolu just watching in silence down at like the base of the screen off camera, or Radagon, or something else to go along with this stuff. He's conveniently avoided the moment she pulls the golden thread so far. So, I mean, even the thing with the golden threads still brings up the question of if this is supposed to be related to the Elden Ring or even the Elden Beast, then what the hell is going on in Fair Missoula? And then did this happen before the Elden Ring was depicted in Fair Missoula? Like, there's just so many questions that come as a result of this story trailer, though. And then Doomfist, welcome back in. Picturing her solo building it by dragging corpses around is nuts. She used magic. Gravity, you know. Maybe not gravity.
Horn scent ritual to ascend to godhood. She created.
Teen Sith says there's a cleansing chamber of some sort before the stairway to the divine gate, which I think is a pretty good argument to say that the cleansing chamber is necessary for somebody to ascend. We don't know if Mikula used it. We could assume perhaps he did, but I would agree that it seems indicative that this may have existed in some form beforehand. And we don't know if there was like a divine gate which Marika made these offerings to. And when he was talking about having no stone before, I was like, well, what about the stairs? I could see this being stone that just covered in, you know, red jelly for you Bloodborne fans out there.
Her own ritual with her own bare hands. The reason why we have never heard of anyone else ever.
Although, to be honest, ever since I saw like this trailer, this kind of has reminded me of that part in A Nightmare on Elm Street, where Nancy's trying to ascend the staircase to her bedroom at the very end of the movie, and instead of like stepping on the stairs, she like sinks through them a bit. And the practical effect that they did was they had like holes in the steps filled with oatmeal. And anyway, it does kind of almost seem like her foot might sink a little bit too unnaturally for this to be a stone step. But I don't know how seriously we want to take that, so.
Some horn scent ritual to ascend to godhood. She created her own ritual with her own bare hands.
Like, it doesn't go down that deeply, but maybe ever so slightly. Maybe it's not stone, at least not yet. Anyway.
The reason why we have never heard of anyone else ever ascending to godhood at the gate of divinity before her is because it did not exist before her, or at least not in this form.
And saying it not in this form might be fair there. But anyway, Faust, welcome into the stream. We were talking about you in a lore video the other day.
There is what appears to be a stone staircase here, so maybe some sort of altar already existed at the summit of the tower, but I can guarantee it did not look like this. The visual design here, the massive petrified corpses, reminds me of something similar in another FromSoftware game. It reminds me of Yahar Ghul, the unseen village in Bloodborne. Just like the Gate of Divinity, Yahar Ghul contains thousands of petrified corpses that are climbing the walls as if attempting to escape.
And to be fair, I want to double thank Teen Sith for bringing up the cleansing chamber again, because it looks like it very much reminds me of the Nexus in Demon Souls, with potentially like hundreds or 1,000 monumentals just kind of chilling around. Do I have it labeled as monumental? Yes, I do. Okay. Yeah, you got these like almost childlike figures in the cleansing chamber, and they're almost dead ringers for the damn monumentals in Demon Souls. And so if we wanted to take like that Demon Souls connection a bit more seriously, then if the monumentals were designed to keep the quote-unquote beast sealed at bay, then what does that say about having a bunch of monumentals in Anir Lim where Marika goes to become a god? Does that have some grander connection to the Elden Beast? Perhaps. It's fun to think about. You gotta say, the Gate of Divinity makes a lot more sense to you as a horn scent thing. Not sure what I've worked on in that sense. So I don't know if it's supposed to be the horn scent or even potentially a group that predated the horn scent, because We do have the Hornsent researching the Rao ruins, and I don't necessarily think the Rao had to build the Divine Gate or anything like that, but it wouldn't surprise me if the Gate of Divinity was built by those who would go on to be, or like the ancestors of those who would go on to become the Hornsent. Because the monumentals that I just showed off there notably do not have horns. Hey, Jameson, nice to see you again. Yeah, look at these jerks in the Hornsent holy city without their horns. Blasphemy.
All of these people seem to have died in a ritual gone wrong. They seem to have been attempting to ascend to Great One status. The Great Ones are essentially the gods of the Bloodborne universe. And these people did ascend, just not in the way they expected. All of their flesh was instead collected into this nightmarish creature, the One Reborn, a monster made of corpses and viscera. It makes me wonder if the developers intend for us to believe that something similar happened at the Gate of Divinity. Did all of these Hornsent believe they were going to ascend to godhood together, and then something went wrong? Or perhaps they were betrayed and destroyed, the ritual turned against them, and then Marika ascended to godhood alone. But wait, what do we...
So True Connoisseur said, you think it's unclear if the monumentals are meant to be mummies or statues? I think, for me, they might be more reminiscent of Sokushin Butsu. Like, people that, due to asceticism, became mummified. So, Sokushin Butsu. Shadow Clone Jutsu. Let's pull up the Google images. And so this will be a little bit of a content warning for you guys, but... if you've watched pretty much anything about Sekiro, you've seen this stuff get brought up before. So, anyway. Let's check out the Wikipedia. A Sokushin Butsu is a type of Buddhist mummy. In Japan, the term refers to the practice of Buddhist monks observing asceticism to the point of death and entering mummification while alive. It is only in Japan that monks are believed to have induced their own death by starvation. It was a Shingon belief. Let's see if there's anything super relevant here. Anyway... we do know that self-asceticism was a practice of the Hornsent based on the tutelary deities who were successful aspects of like the Hornsent coming into divinity of their own. So that might have been an extension of their practices from a more ancient time. Let me see if we have any of the monuments from... that one does look a little bit more bronze. So this might be a lighting thing. See, this one doesn't look as bronze to me. Yeah, I don't know. That one's definitely a heck of a lot shinier. Anyway. A living Buddha? Well, they're not living no more, but yeah. If they're not actually statues, they petrified somehow. So I think like they mummified. Yeah, as Methoda said, mummified skin is quite shiny and leathery. He's the residential expert on that for sure. Because he's a serial killer.
We mean when we say that Marika ascended to godhood during this ritual? What does the term godhood actually mean in this setting? No character ever defines it. What is the difference between Marika the mortal or Marika the god? Well, once again, I am going to look at Bloodborne for clues as to how to analyze Elden Ring. As I already mentioned, in Bloodborne there are these beings called Great Ones, who might as well be gods. They are beings who possess incredible power, and that is the only difference between
You say a man's allowed hobbies with the Leatherface bastard of Loran emoji. I see what you did there.
them and everyone else. It's just a difference in power. And I believe that this is the only difference between gods and mortals in Elden Ring too. The reason why Marika became a god here is, very simply, because she seized a relic that contained great power. A greater power than anyone else in the setting possesses. And that relic was not the Elden Ring. That's not what we are shown. Instead, we are shown her acquiring something else. But before we discuss that in more detail, we need to talk about Miquella. One of the most...
I wonder if he's going to get to it later. I'm going to zoom on ahead a little bit looking at... I can't really call these thumbnails. Bro, my man had to use this footage so often. I wonder how many times that gets played. I'm not blaming him, because you can only work with what you got. Okay, so he doesn't bring it up. I was a little bit surprised that he jumped to Bloodborne, but I mean, it makes sense for building his argument. And there's very little to say about it, so I certainly don't blame him for failing to mention this. But when you go to Nokron and Noxtella and, you know, the Eternal Cities, they've got a bunch of fryboys, as I like to call them, which are seemingly in a somewhat similar state as to the way that these things are mummified, but they seem to also have something different going on. So I've wondered if there's supposed to be a thematic connection with the Nox trying to raise a Lord of the Night and Marika raising question mark redacted. So I'll let you draw from that what you will.
Confusing aspects of how the Gate of Divinity is being portrayed here is that the ritual Miquella carries out looks so very different than whatever Marika is doing in this trailer. His does not involve any mass death or slaughter or viscera. He passes all the way through to the other side and then has to be called back by Radagon. He divests himself of his flesh, his emotions, his other self, of Saint Trina, of his fate, of his heritage, his great rune, everything that makes Miquella Miquella before passing through.
Yeah, these are all solid observations. So one thing that might also be different about the way that Miquella needs to conduct his ritual versus the way that Marika needed to have done hers might be because Miquella is currently in the Shadow Realm, which may or may not be the realm of death. So maybe Marika had to do extra steps because she was in the realm of life, and so she needed to offer a bunch of death. But of course, I really don't know how I feel about that. That's just kind of spitballing why some things might have needed to be different. But regardless, we see Miquella coming from like the inside of the gate, whereas we have Marika stepping toward it. So it does seem like to be a bit of an opposite thing directionally. Now, some people have wondered if where we are in the Shadowlands is on the opposite side of the gate that Marika steps to, which I think is a really neat idea, but I don't really have strong opinions on one way or the other.
Whereas whatever Marika is doing clearly involves a great deal of blood and death. She only steps up to the threshold and then holds aloft these golden threads. We are never shown her actually passing all the way through the gate, which I think is significant. Unlike Miquella, she has not divested herself of her other self. We know that Radagon is still a part of her all the way into the present. She does not seem to have divested herself of her flesh either. I don't think she has divested herself of anything. I think that the only conclusion we can draw is that the reason why these two rituals look so very different from each other is because they are obviously not the same ritual. The developers are very clearly presenting us with two completely different rituals meant to achieve two completely different results. As the narration in the trailer explicitly states, in this scene, we are witnessing the birth of gold. And what does that mean? Well, I think this refers to the birth not of the entire Elden Ring, but of a new, single Great Rune, a golden Great Rune, which will allow for the beginning of a new Golden Age. To prove my point, we are going to watch the Shadow of the Erdtree story trailer together. We are going to break it down piece by piece, line by line, and analyze what the developers and writers are trying to communicate to their audience. To begin, I'm going to play the first 20 or 30 seconds of the trailer. As you watch, pay attention to who is narrating this trailer, and how that changes our understanding of the content. Pay attention to the language used, the imagery. Specifically, notice if there is anything, for lack of a better word, sexual about what we're told and shown in this scene. Okay, here it is.
Mikula the Kind spoke of the beginning. The seduction and the betrayal. An affair from which gold arose.
The trailer opens with a black screen and the voice of Needle Knight Leda. This is interesting. Sometimes FromSoftware game cinematics are voiced by unnamed narrators, like the opening cinematic of Elden Ring or the introduction to Dark Souls. Narrators who are apparently omniscient and unbiased. But other times, their cinematics are voiced by in-game characters. For example, in the Shadow of the Erdtree story trailer, the information we are receiving is limited by Leda's own personal knowledge of the events, and she explicitly tells
I definitely appreciate the framing that he's making here, and I might be getting a little bit ahead of him, but okay, he might bring up the Mikula thing, but I'm imagining that even if this is voiced by Leda, very, very few people are going to really take a lot of issue with this, because she's essentially relaying what she believes Mikula's words to be, and I do think there could be arguments to be made that Mikula may have deceived her, because he seems perhaps not entirely on the up and up as some people may or may not wish, but we also have the question of how much Mikula knew of the beginning, because we certainly don't know what Ronnie or any of the other demigods think about anything, which is super annoying. So how trustworthy is this information? Really kind of depends on the individual, but I don't really think there's a lot we have to truly question it. So I tend to take it as at face value that this is secondhand information from a potentially more likely than not reliable source.
us where
Get Freuded? No, you. Methoda said, when we have the wide shot of Marika at the gate, it seems like there's more flat land behind her than what we have in modern times? ? So keep in mind, we do know for a fact that the opening story cinematic, which I guess I couldn't call it an opening, the story cinematic was developed by an out-of-house company, and like one of the artists talked about it on her... Was it DeviantArt? I don't think it was DeviantArt, but something along those lines. And then people bombarded her with questions, and I think she just went radio silent, or she may have even like changed things. So we were told that Marika is pulling ? Out of a diaper, which may be a French way of saying a swaddling cloth, because I mean, why wouldn't it be? So people are really going wild with the speculation based on that. So as far as like the actual features being different from what we see in game, you can make statements that, you know, it's been so long that, you know, you don't even see the base of the stairs. Like there's that gap why we can't climb into the gate ourselves, or just a little bit of oversight, but who knows?
where she learned it from. This was told to her by Mikula. So this is fourth-hand information. Leda did not witness these events herself, and neither did Mikula. He was not alive yet. We don't have a clue where he got his information from. As far as we know, Marika is the only character still living who saw what happened at the Gate of Divinity firsthand. So she is the only one who knows the truth. The information we are receiving from Leda is limited and full of gaps. It is
And to be fair, Mikola was chilling around in the Shadowkeep for a long time. He found the Sacred Right Scroll. He may have learned things there. He's also been integrated into the trees at some point, so maybe he is able to access the memories of things like that, or maybe he just has a magic spell or magic demigod powers which allows him to do it. So I don't think it's impossible for Mikola to have learned, but we certainly don't know how reliable his information is. So I think it's fair to question it, although I wouldn't go so far as to say it's impossible for him to have known. Maybe Frat Brett didn't quite say it that way, but I just want to reiterate that point.
Being filtered through two different biased and flawed perspectives. The intention of the writers is clear. Not only does the audience not know the full story of what happened here, but the audience cannot know the full truth. We are missing pieces of the puzzle, and we have no means of recovering those pieces. But as I stated earlier, we do know the consequences of what she did, what makes these events meaningful, and that's all that matters. But let's rewind a little. In the story,
I'm wondering if he's trying to say that the consequences are that both Gold and Shadow were born. I thought he might have brought that up earlier in the video, although I might be misremembering what Fat Brett's talked about with what A Tragedy had posted. The birth of Gold, ? So I would probably need to rewatch this to see what kind of language he used, but anyway.
Story trailer, Letta says, Mikola the Kind spoke of the beginning. There is an intentional vagueness in her language here. The beginning of what? Of the Golden Order, of Marika's godhood, of the Erdtree, of the Elden Ring, of Marika's rule over the lands between, of something else? It could.
Yeah, that's kind of been my line of questioning as well, because we're told the beginning, and as Fat Brett was saying, we don't know what, so that's kind of why I've been so reluctant to give true timeline considerations as to what's going on with the story trailer and the timeline of events leading into the DLC.
Be any of these and all of these and none of these. But for the sake of this video, I am going to assume that this is simply referring to the beginning of Marika's godhood. Next, we see an image of a human hand wearing golden bracelets, reaching into a bloody, pale mass of flesh and pulling out golden threads. So let's start with those bracelets. What does wearing golden jewelry indicate about a character? Perhaps wealth, or status, or maybe even royalty. My point is, we are not being shown a Marika who is poor or enslaved. Instead, we are being shown a character who already possesses some measure of power and money and influence.
I think that's probably a fair statement. And if she was poor when she had these, it's not as though she removed that aspect of herself. So I think this is meant to signify power to some degree. Or it could just be supposed to be a visual callback to the fact that Marika has these in her concept art. And so this might just be an identifier. So don't know if this is just purely symbolism or actually relevant, but nonetheless still a solid observation. Hey Blood Ring, welcome back in. Getting dolled up for the ritual? I mean, you gotta look good to get your hands bloodied. PC, you still think this looks like a snake? The thing that gets me about this is Blood Ring was saying, this kind of looks like a vagina. I don't know if it's actually supposed to be indicative of one, and if it's just been touched up in such a way to be censor friendly, or if this is supposed to be an actual swaddling cloth, because it does look like this has been stitched together, but I don't know. Just the way that it's flowing and the way that it moves and the fact that her hand is bloody. Granted, we don't know if her hand was bloody to begin with. I think it's probably likely because you see bloodstains on her arm already, assuming that the blood must have flown that way rather than only getting the blood after her hands come out. So it seems as though Marika was part of what happened to the stuff in the background for sure. before she even interacted with this thing. And yeah, another common idea, like PC was saying, that some people think this could be a blank eye. I am just reticent that we don't have like actual eyelashes, but I would expect to have like seen them somewhere. Teen Sith says you can see frayed threads in the cloth. That ain't skin. Or is it God's skin that's been frayed? Global thinks the majority of people saw this and got a yonic sense from it. All right. Anyway.
Next, the flesh, the blood, that gooey orifice she is sticking her hand inside. There is something distinctly off-putting about this imagery, even kind of horrific. It reminds me of that scene in Silent Hill 2 where the main character shoves his hand into a dripping black hole in the wall. I think in both cases, the animators want the audience to have the same reaction. They want you to feel grossed out. They want you to feel as if there is something sick or disgusting happening here. Even if we don't understand exactly what that something is, we know just from its visual design that it is wrong. And then the hand pulls out these golden threads. These threads do look identical to the threads we see hanging off Marika's hammer way back in the original trailer, when she was shown shattering the Elden ring. So it is a common belief that these threads are runes, and I agree with that belief. But not the entire Elden ring. I think it's only one specific rune, but I'll explain that more in a bit. Next, Letta says, the seduction and the betrayal. Once again, the language is extremely vague. Who is seducing or betraying who, and how, and why? Well, let's take a closer look at the imagery in this scene and figure out what the writers are suggesting here. I think there is something explicitly sexual about the imagery and language in this trailer. We hear the word seduction, and then in the next shot, the camera is focused on a woman's bare leg and feet. We hear the word affair, and then we see a shot of a topless woman from behind. Whenever you're analyzing a story, you should pay attention to what the characters are wearing. Clothing is a fantastic and common tool for communicating themes and information to the audience. And I think it is significant that Marika is not wearing very much clothing in this scene. Later, we can find the Hornsent Grand Am, who describes Marika as a wanton strumpet. Strumpet is an outdated term that refers to a female prostitute. Again,
Polyester Pimp says, stop repeating that footage. Get wrecked. I mean, he's just, this is like the entirety of the video. It's more this than not. And also, welcome back in. Where's the Get Freuded gif when you need it? Next to the cigars.
And again, the language of sexual impropriety is used to describe Marika's relationship with the Hornsent and the subsequent birth of the Golden Order. Seduction, affair, strumpet. In this description, Marika resembles the classic archetype of the femme fatale, the fatal beauty, the dangerous woman, who
Any Velvet Underground fans in the chat?
Uses her charm and her sexuality to capture, manipulate, and then destroy hapless male characters. I think it is notable that we find statues of Marika throughout the Realm of Shadow, and that those statues are depicted with different body language than those in the Lands Between. These statues depict Marika with her arms outstretched, as if she is offering something to the viewer, or about to embrace the viewer. It is an expression of warmth or plenty, whereas
I mean, it's very obvious here that Marika is doing the giant dad pose because she is Radagon and she is your father.
Embrace the viewer. It is an expression of warmth or plenty, whereas in the Realms Between she is depicted with her arms strung up in the air, almost as if she has been crucified. It is a much colder body language.
You could also think of if she had strings attached to her that it might also be puppet-like, but I digress. Teen Sith brought up a good point that I was going to wait to bring up as well, although I was going to say it in a bit of a different way. She said, this is wild because you think the point of depicting her topless is to make her look vulnerable in the story trailer. So whether or not I would ascribe vulnerability to it is maybe not quite the same way to that I was thinking about it. Let me see here. So I was getting more like Nike vibes. The goddess, not the shoe company, but you know. That like being bare-chested isn't necessarily like a sign of vulnerability as much as it could be a sign of like what, openness? There's something that I'm trying to think of, but I'm failing to articulate it. It was definitely like a really big theme for like many sculptures of goddesses who are like victorious to kind of be in a similar pose to Marika in the story trailer. I mean, obviously, like they weren't lifting their arms up in the same way, but like I don't know, I can't articulate this thought. Brazen, that's not quite the same, but I definitely see what you're going for with that, Rooster Rick. And also, welcome into the stream. Marika said, "Just do it." Exactly. Scaleezy said, "Insulting a woman by calling her promiscuous is common enough that you can't really take the Grandom's words as fact. She's clearly biased." I kind of agree with that as well. And then Kyle, welcome back in. "You assumed it was a way for her to accept grace through the Elden Ring into her body, like we must be naked for Three Fingers, Lamenters, and the dragon form as well." That's actually a pretty interesting reading as well. My biggest complaint about that would be, then why do we not have any presence of the Two Fingers or even like two-finger iconography around a near limb, or at least the Divine Gate specifically? Which isn't to say like your idea is bad by any means. This is just me being more upset at the lack of info presented in the game. And then Paisan, welcome back in. Transparency, there you go, like claiming nothing to hide. That's closer, that's closer. She's struggling against the wind emanating from the gate. I see what you mean, but I wouldn't quite say that it's like a struggle. Like in a certain sense, she's like keeping balanced, but I know what you mean though. All right, here we go.
Changes between these statues, we are seeing a change in character. Once upon a time, to the Horn Scent, Marika presented herself as someone who could offer them something, and they wanted it. They wanted her. They were seduced by her. I think it is very likely that Marika was already the vessel of the Elden Ring at this point in the story, or at least an older version of the Elden Ring. But even then, she was not powerful enough to be called a god. Not until she took possession of the Great Golden Arc Rune, the rune which towers above all the others, the true center or spine of the Elden Ring as it exists today. Okay, let me explain. We know that the Elden Ring is modular and changeable. Runes can be removed and runes can be added. We know that the Elden Ring at the time of Farum Azula's construction had a different appearance than the Elden Ring of the present. We know that the Rune of Death was removed at some point in the past. Runes are not immortal, not everlasting. Old ones can be destroyed. Mikola apparently shatters his own Great Rune when he discards it, and it seems likely that Ranni's Great Rune has been destroyed too. Both Radahn and Melinia's runes are infected by Scarlet Rot. Rykard's Great Rune is devoured by the Immortal Serpent, never to be fully recovered. And over the course of the game, 3 new Great Runes can be born or created. These are the Mending Runes.
To be fair, the Mending Runes might technically be different, at least up until the point they get integrated with the ring, and that isn't really saying anything against his idea here. It's just, would a Mending Rune still be considered a Great Rune if it was never brought into the ring? So let's say you unlock the access to do Fia's Ending or Goldmask's Ending, but you choose to do Dung Eaters. Would you still call the Mending Rune of Perfect Order a Great Rune? Maybe, maybe not. But that might also tie into like the golden amber egg rune thing, the rune of the unborn.
Each of which is generated
But yeah, because that one doesn't need extra benediction. That one's always been a bit of a metaphorical thorn in the side.
by a different Tarnished, each for different reasons. They are Gold Mask's Mending Rune of Perfect Order, the Dung Eater's Mending Rune of the Fell Curse, and Fia's Mending Rune of the Death Prince. The process or method of creation is completely different in each case. Gold Mask simply has to contemplate the mysteries of the Golden Order and learn the truth of Radagon's identity.
Teen Sith said she sees a bunch of goop and vagina imagery, and you think birth or menstruation and not sex, but maybe you're built different. Well, keep in mind, you've been in the Discord long enough that we've definitely tread the topic of the Yuwaku, the temptation, as opposed to the seduction, quite a lot. So that's probably influenced your perspective for a number of months at this point. All right, and you have a good night then. Thanks for joining us again.
The Dung Eater must be tortured and forced to ingest his own seedbed curses. Fia's is the most elaborate. She must reunite the two halves of the Hallowbrand, then lay with Godwin's body, transferring the strength of champions to his still living corpse. The point is that there is no standard process for creating new runes. The only common element between them all is death. Each of the Tarnished has to die to allow the new rune to be born. That is what is happening in this trailer. It is clearly...
Bloodring asks, is Dung Eater a tribute to Kagare? That's a good question. I think, in a way, as he exists in the current paradigm of things, sort of yes, because he wants defilement to bring everybody down. But then at the end of his vision, defilement will become defilement no more, and then for everybody there will be a blessing. So, maybe not.
Not the entire Elden Ring. The Elden Ring is made up of a complicated series of concentric overlapping circles, whereas Marika is shown here only holding a single arc of threads. And we even know which rune she gave birth to here. Just look at this image of the Elden Ring from the game's cover art. Do you see anything that resembles the rune Marika was just holding in that trailer? Here, I'll circle it for you. It's right there at the top of the Elden Ring.
I don't think that's fair because he did show the Fair Mizulan one and that was kind of there. If anything, you might be able to point to any of the other three below there or the rune arc that exists at the bottom. So here I go getting my Elden Ring Fair Missoula again. Where's me footage? If everyone is cursed, no one is exactly. Hey guys, I found it. Hold on. Look, the arrows are pointing here now. Like, it kind of arguably was there. Although, I do like the idea that Marika's Elden Rune, as it's called, could have been what she pulled out of the thing in the story trailer. But it always comes back down to the Fair Mizulan stuff.
That's the rune she created at the Gate of Divinity. That is the purpose of...
Oh yeah, the other thing that I forgot to show off with the Fair Mizulan thing is, unlike that last depiction of the Elden Ring, you don't quite have the almost like a fishhook rune barb things going on. I called them barbs just now because that may or may not relate to what the Hornsent call the barbs in their arcs, whatever they are. Wait, how do they call that? Let me double check. I don't need arcane. Hello, girl. The arc resembles the barb. It's just called Giant Golden Arc. Okay. Oh, it resembles the barb. Okay, that makes sense. So yeah, I think I'll back this up.
thing.
Like,
Here, I'll circle it. that resembles the rune Marika
Like, these things down here are not what you see in the Fair Mizulan thing, so you could make the argument that that's what Marika was pulling out, as opposed to the thing at the top, so... More food for thought with that. And then Impact Player was saying that there is a spiral in the Fair Mizulan Elden Rune, yeah. And we don't exactly have that in this one as well. Faust says, how about the strands of golden hair like the ones you find in the shaman village? Wait, what golden... Oh, you mean the braid? Sorry, what's your point with that? Rooster Rick says, if it was there before, perhaps she is stealing the rune. Maybe. Maybe that's how she became an Empyrean, for all we know. It's weird.
was just holding in that trailer. Here, I'll circle it for you. It's right there at the top of the Elden Ring. That's the rune she created at the Gate of Divinity. That is the purpose of her ritual. Going forward, Marika became defined by this rune and its power. That is why her statues changed to resemble its shape. This is the true foundation of her godhood. And
as far as this idea goes, I don't really have a lot of problems with it. I think it is a good possibility that if this is supposed to represent a rune arc, then Marika could be representing where the blessings would pool down into, and that might be relevant. So, yeah.
There's more. Notice that this rune is made up of two parts. There is the arc at the top, and then the spine running along the middle. If you look at Marika's scar and sore seals, you can see that her rune includes both of these lines. Now look at the imagery in the trailer again. Marika is clearly holding the arc, but can you see the spine? Well, yes, the spine is Marika's body. I think that the developers are not only showing us the birth of a new great rune here, they are showing us Marika herself being reborn as the spine of that rune. Marika is not just the vessel of the Elden Ring, she is the Elden Ring, at least the most powerful part of it. That is why she is a god and no one else. I discussed back in my video on Godwin all of the evidence.
Didn't he say earlier in this video that he thinks Marika could have had the Elden Ring before this point? Before, like, coming up here? Maybe. I don't know. Doomfist said, is the Rune of Death present at all in the previous Elden Ring? So that is certainly a matter of interpretation. We might not have the depiction of the Rune of Death as we know it, because we only ever see a fragment of it. Some people have wondered whether or not the Rune of Death relates to, like, the Black Slayer's, wait, no, what it's called, the God Slayer's Greatsword, and this might relate to how that sword comes into a spiral. When we look at the spiral tree seal, that could relate to this as well, but we don't see hands at the top of it. So, could the Rune of Death been integrated into this at some point, and does the Rune of Death relate to these root-like things in the background? Well, maybe, because the Rune of Death does break off and become Deathroot, so perhaps. But when we look at this incarnation of the Elden Ring, we don't know what part was removed to create the Golden Order or anything like that. And we do have two different elements with the title art cover of the Elden Ring, because you have Radagon's rune in the background, as well as like the fishhook golden barb looking like things. And SNX, thanks for joining us. You have a good night. So hopefully that answers your question. In other words, we don't know.
In the game that suggests runes are alive. The fact that the Elden Beast, a clearly living creature, is said to literally be the Elden Ring. And Fia's dialogue, which suggests that her mending rune is Godwin's life reborn. Well, now I think that Marika is a rune that has maintained her human form. However, putting all this wild speculation aside, as I said at the very beginning of this video, what happened at the Gate of Divinity is far less important than the consequences of what happened there. And what were the consequences? Well, let's watch just a little more of the story trailer to find out. Here it is.
An affair from which gold arose. and so too was Shadow born. What followed was a war unseen. One that could never be put to song. A purge without grace or honor.
At this moment, Marika gave birth to Gold, or more accurately, her seductive affair with the Hornsent and then betrayal gave birth to Gold. And it also gave birth to Shadow, to darkness, to suffering. What followed was the most brutal and least honorable war in the history of the Lands Between. Messmer's crusade, a religious genocide, a mass slaughter on a scale never seen before. It is important that the writers are directly tying these two events together. Marika acquires new power in a horrific bloody ritual, and then a new horrific bloody war begins, though
So that has a lot of huge issues unless you're saying Marika becomes a god later in the timeline than most people would suspect. Because in order for Messmer's crusade to happen, there already needs to be the Erdtree for the Shadow Tree sigil to be present on his forces' helmets and whatnot. And Radagon needs to already have married Renala because Gaius is left behind because he participated in the Crusades and Gaius is friends with Radon. Plus you have R'hllana in the Lands of Shadow. So I think Fat Brett might be conflating a couple things here because even though Letta says that, when she says what follows, I mean, technically tomorrow will follow the fall of the Roman Empire, but there's a hell of a gap between the fall of the Roman Empire and the events that are going to transpire tomorrow, you know? So the devil's in the details, where this is like the Futurama technically correct type of argumentation. So that is something I think we should remain cognizant of, because if you believe that Marika became a god at the outset of her order with Godfrey, then it is very clear that the crusade happens way later than that. The High pre-release was insane. Oh yeah, I absolutely loved the story trailer. Like, I was so hyped seeing the damn Divine Gate stuff. So, without horns, welcome back in, by the way.
the timeline does not seem to line up. As far as I can tell, Messmer's crusade
Okay, sweet.
began quite a long while after the establishment of the Golden Order. But that does not matter. All that matters is that the writers are explicitly connecting these events, regardless of when they actually occurred. I have already explained the thematic implications. In this story, in the world of Elden Ring, the foundations of power are portrayed to be grotesque, gruesome, and vile. The consequences of wielding that gruesome power are devastation and suffering at a massive scale. We see it in the brutality of Messmer's crusade. We see it in the seemingly endless wars Marika's Golden Order fought with all its neighbors. The giants, the Carians, the dragons, even against the stars themselves. We see it in the tyrannical nature of the Golden Order, all the suffering it caused. We see it in the devastating civil war between the demigods that followed the shattering of the Elden Ring. In this setting, power destroys. And it all started with a twisted and horrific ritual, with a seduction and betrayal, with Marika committing a terrible sin to acquire a fundamentally corrupt and cursed power. And that is what really happened at the Gate of Divinity. This was originally meant to be a video where I examined all of the remaining mysteries surrounding Marika's story, but I ended
I'm going to double check that part where he talks about the timeline.
slaughter on a scale never seen before. It is important that the writers are directly tying these two events together. Marika acquires new power in a horrific bloody ritual, and then a new horrific bloody war begins, though the timeline does not seem to line up. As far as I can tell, Messmer's crusade began quite a long while after the establishment of the Golden Order. But that does not matter. All that matters is that the writers are explicitly connecting these events, regardless of when they actually occurred. I have already explained the thematic implications. In this story, in the world of Elden Ring, the foundations of power are portrayed to be grotesque, gruesome, and vile. The consequences of wielding that gruesome power are devastation and suffering at a massive scale. We see it in the brutality of Messmer's crusade. We see it in the seemingly endless wars. Marika's Golden Order fought with all its neighbors. The giants, the Carians, the dragons, even against the stars themselves. We see it in the tyrannical nature of the Golden Order, all the suffering it caused. We see it in the devastating civil war between the demigods that followed the shattering of the Elden Ring. In this setting, power destroys. And it all started with a twisted and horrific ritual, with a seduction and betrayal, with Marika committing a terrible sin to acquire a fundamentally corrupt and cursed power. And that is what really happened at the Gate of Divinity.
Alright, so it does sound like he thinks this happened at the very outset of Marika's reign then, which is fine, I guess.
This was originally meant to be a video where I examined all of the remaining mysteries surrounding Marika's story, but I ended up spending so much time discussing the Gate of Divinity that I've decided to just lop it off and post it as its own separate video. Which means that, believe it or not, I still have one more final cleanup video about Marika to write before I can move on. So next time I am going to look at all of the other mysteries that still surround her character. Like, what is the truth about her involvement in the Night of the Black Knives? Or what is her connection to the Guidance of Grace? And what does that reveal about her motivations? So, see you then.
Whoops.
I think the greatest mystery
Why can't
remaining
I
in
exit
Marika's
this? What the hell?
story is this.
Couldn't exit full screen. Anyway, that was a nice video. I'm going to share it with you guys. If you want to give Fat Brett some support, by all means, feel free. The link is in the chat now. So, not that I really expected to get concrete answers. I'm still kind of left almost, it feels like, where I started with this video, which, of course, I'm not really going to entirely blame Flat Brett. It's almost like the opposite of his name. I'm not going to blame Fat Brett for right there. So, yeah, I don't know. Despite everything, I do think it was a very well-produced video. He was very thoughtful with the way he framed his arguments, which I appreciate greatly. And yeah, it was just a very solid one. And I guess I'm less disappointed in Fat Brett as much as I am just the game, really. Paisan, you like Fat Brett as well as his non-Elden Ring stuff? Yeah, we've watched a couple videos on his channel, and they've all been pretty consistently high quality. All right, so anyway, now that I'm left dazed and confused, let's go ahead and figure out how FromSoftware fans lost the plot
Competence has run its
with Zaminical. So, don't know what this is going to be out or about, if it's going to be saying how we lost all of our skill, how we cried too much with the release of Shadow of the Erdtree, or if it's going to be about the lore at all. So let's find out. We found the plot, apparently.
competence has run its course within the fanbase. If you thought they'd stick with the same boss tricks and AI for over a decade, and you proceed to piss and moan that bosses in this game break rules that you for some reason align with previous titles, you're a fraud.
You got the
Moan that
Zoomer
bosses
edits.
in this game break rules that you for some reason align with previous.
Soulsborne fans that the Elden Ring boss doesn't fight like bosses from the older games. I always kind of hated this argument because I felt like there's something more to it when you've played all the other Soulsborne games like Sekiro and adapted and beat games like Sekiro, but there feels something off about Shadow of the Erdtree specifically that even puts it at odds with the base game. So, anyway.
Titles, you're a fraud. I knew it! We can pinpoint Sekiro for this transition in design philosophy.
Zaminical, enjoy the vid.
It's 2016, and amidst the release of Overwatch,
The music is a little bit loud, I will admit, compared to his voice.
watch at its prime. Your friend hits you with a game recommendation like none other. Some real difficult game that withholds challenges and struggles which you gotta endure through. The game I'm talking about is Dark Souls 3.
Oh my god.
So loud.
Stop.
You boot it up and never having played a game in this style before, you die a bit until you arrive outside what looks like a boss's arena. And you see homeboy there, walking up to the ominous figure. You're prompted to pull the sword from his chest. In doing so, it's got sudden movement, and the next thing you know, it's straight to boxing. And you die. You die a lot. You're struggling to see the appeal. Like, seriously, why would your friend recommend this game to you? This is just agony. With every new attempt, though, you begin to see a vision. Every moment of failure has ultimately led you to this epiphany. As you chip away at the boss with a funny name, you think to yourself, I'm getting better. I understand now. Whether you were irritated or bothered at multiple points during that process, you feel a rush, an indescribable feeling that can only best be described as fulfillment. You overcame that process. I say you did that shit, twin. And so from there, you continue on to the journey which lies ahead, keeping that thought of arrogance and pride in your mind. Who's next? By the way, I spent almost a couple hours on Gundyr, but hey, I know I suck. I remember beating Dark Souls 3 for the first time, as it was my first.
I mean, I don't blame him for taking a while to face Gundyr, especially if that was his first Dark Souls experience. I don't remember Gundyr taking too long for me, but I'd already played Dark Souls 1 and a tiny bit of Dark Souls 2 before getting to that point. Hey, Mike Bailey, welcome back into the stream. All right, without horns.
First Souls game, feeling both satisfied but empty. Replaying the game was still fun, but the mystery of the challenge wasn't really there anymore. This was somewhat of a universal feeling in the community at the height of the trilogy's finale. Regardless of what somebody's first Souls game was, at the time, we all wondered what was next. Many, like myself, would go on to experience something new by playing the older games for the first time. Others would move on to play other titles. But one thing was for sure though, we all craved a new challenge, in whatever way, shape, or form that would be presented in by FromSoftware's next project, which was a mystery at the time. So now here we are in 2025, and real talk, the fanbase has lost the plot. It's a whole ass identity crisis because it's not the part of the player base that was introduced into the franchise with Elden Ring. Nah, it's the unks of the franchise, which is even crazier work than you think.
Enemies likewise have extremely exaggerated delays on their attacks, and this leaves long windows between hits where you can capitalize on openings if you know hit timings.
Which is funny because we always bring up Morgott in relation to this, or Margit more specifically as their first boss move, but excuse me, I actually do appreciate how long his delayed attack is on his Shillelagh move, the Irish super delayed attack, which everybody knows at this point. So, while it is a little bit obnoxious sometimes, I do think it's a legitimate combat strategy, which is why I don't really get too bent out of shape with delayed attacks. As much as it is, sometimes it's hard to know the actual parry timings based off of the animations as opposed to like when they start their animations. And that's kind of something I've always felt as though I've struggled with a bit, but it just takes like repetition, which kind of sucks.
Theoretically.
Night Rain, something.
And so like the whole complaints about Margit and the delayed attacks or even the combat to an extent, I feel is just kind of overblown. Let me rephrase this. Like, people complaining about the complainers seem to be missing the point. Or, as a matter of fact, they may have lost the plot. Because these people have played games like Sekiro before and beaten them. And of course, Sekiro had its own controversy with its difficulty and its lack of settings and things like that. So, anyway.
We have one trailer and a few interviews worth of information for is under fire. We're getting more of what we've enjoyed before, and suddenly y'all not fucking with it? Like, no! Why you do that? That's my guy! And do y'all remember when the DLC came out and how many people took to the internet to complain about their shortcomings or to leave a bad review because it was quote unquote too hard?
What?
Like, what does that even mean?
Got a fucking goofster in here. Goofster. Not a goof troop. Doofus and doofus. Goof troop. Fuck he say.
Me when the game does its job? I mean, damn, it's like the company who's held a consistent track record in making a DLC harder than the base game did it again. Insult to injury, it's bad when this guy understands these games more than its own stubborn-ass fanbase.
I'm asking your ass, but your ass though, cause you really like saying it's too hard. Put your big boy pants on and go fight. Like, what are you talking about? Why the fuck would they make a DLC for you to breeze past in a day or two? Make it make sense, my nigga.
But Tom, he's a new gen and hasn't played the Bloodborne DLC yet. The best thing that ever happened to gaming in the industry.
Anyways, I can boil down the majority of complaints to punish windows are too tight, it's never my turn to attack even after a boss throws a wombo combo my way. Or, I get punished for trying to heal and enemy AI input reading me is artificial difficulty and not fair. And the ultimate complaint with the most AI input reading me is artificial difficulty and not fair.
This guy gets it. More on this in a bit later. Anyway, I'm just going to read it now because it's going to annoy me if I don't. True input reads are pretty much only for when you use a flask in neutral, and the boss has a move designed to punish that. For example, the Godskin's fire attack. Melina does respond to daggers you throw at her. Not sure if she's responding to the input or the dagger, though. In any case, it's much more common that there are position-based combo extensions. They don't read your input, but the boss will keep attacking if you stand in front of them. Impact Player says, if this is too much for Elle, then stay away from Maxor. Okay. Rooster says, what possessed this dude to produce such a video? I mean, he seems to be part of a kind of community where that's just kind of common. I think like starting from the days of Video Game Donkey and then transitioning into content creators like Kiori, who... Wait, did Kiori rebrand his channel or her channel now? Anyway, I haven't kept up to know super well. They just kind of started doing the more Call of Duty 360 no-scope type meme content. Not Donkey, obviously. And it kind of created its own subgenre of video editing, which this is kind of a byproduct of. Is this Reddit drama, basically? Yeah, of course. Who else would you think have lost the plot? It's definitely got to be Redditors.
And the ultimate complaint with the most stocks, bosses do too much damage. Fun fact, there is a direct solution to each of those complaints, which I'll get into more in depth later in the video. Except for that last one, I'll just save you the trouble right now and tell you what the effective fix is 10 out of 10 times.
Once we 19 dodge!
Begin dodge protocol.
It's not that complex!
What? What?
Full transparency on the topic of complaints, I cannot stand when I'm watching a critique video over the game and I gotta witness a bare bone ass comparison to a previous title. You know what? They make sense until the person forgets they're supposed to be critiquing Elden Ring, not glazing an older title.
They give you absolutely no time to heal or even attack for more than one hit at a time. I went back to Dark Souls 3 the other day and was shocked at how many hits I could get in at once.
They're two different games. These type of arguments really can't hold their own without making some goofy comparison.
I've tried playing hyper offensively against her before, and when that works in your favor, it's such a foreign feeling. It takes me back to some of the best hunter fights in Bloodborne.
I still haven't gotten to explaining why and how this game is fundamentally different. These are just not comparable. It's like comparing Goku and Goku Black. They're not the same. And dog, some of these criticisms are so bad. It is to a point where the creator can deadass pinpoint how this game is combatively different, but they straight up refuse to adapt.
That clearly, I'm expected to know AI manipulations or high-level dodging techs.
At this point, it's a blatant confession to just being straight basura.
Alright, so he put on the screen there, you are, yes, observational skill isn't a foreign concept. So I feel like that's completely missing the point where these players dislike that. Like, it's not that they need to get good. They're expressing that they would prefer the game to be a different way, that they would have a fairer chance to potentially one-shot a boss based off of very telegraphed movements and having enough time to both read those movements and react and feel rewarded or punished accordingly based off of what the enemies are doing, whereas they feel like that isn't entirely at play in a game like Elden Ring as opposed to some of their older titles. Now, sure, Elden Ring is a new game, and I agree to an extent that it should be judged by its own merit, but I would also say there's a ton of inconsistency as far as Elden Ring is concerned, because who are the bosses that people complain about in Elden Ring? In the base game, it's mostly Margit, which he is a wall boss, but he is kind of unironically one of the trickiest bosses to actually defeat, I think, and like learn his skill set because of the delayed attacks, his ranged options, things along those lines. And of course, when you face him for the first time, you have very limited flask options, so that's another layer of difficulty added on top of it. But setting him aside, Melina is obviously the biggest complaint, and I think Malekith is another big complaint. I don't really see people complaining about Godfrey or Horaloo. other than that, like, he's hard, but not like too difficult. And the other biggest complaint boss that I can remember from the base game would be Radagon, because it's just a war of attrition between Radagon and the Elden Beast, as opposed to anything individual about those bosses, as far as I know. And of course, there are going to be some complainers, and no matter what example I bring up, there will be a counterexample of somebody complaining about it. But my point is, you don't really have people complaining about the vast majority of the enemies in the game. People didn't really complain about Godric. They don't complain about the soldiers of God and Godric, or the Erdtree soldiers, or when they do complain about them, it's because, damn, they hit hard, but they're not, those are like complaints of a different kind, and I feel like it's kind of unfair to hyperfixate on very specific complaints and say that they need to get good at the game, because arguably the game isn't giving players the skill set to mitigate these challenges in the same level of consistency throughout. So, kind of annoyed by the framing of this. But I mean, this isn't necessarily limited to this dude's video. We've definitely seen other videos like this in the past where they've kind of rehashed the same arguments. Scalezi said Kazan was harder than Shadow of the Erdtree, and you're pissed and complained way less. So I was thinking about that as well. Like, I do think in many ways Kazan is more challenging than Shadow of the Erdtree, but I've never felt like it's actually unfair. There's been a couple moves I'm like, what the hell am I actually supposed to do right now? And it's taken a little bit of timing to get things right. Or certain fights just feel like a little bit too spongy, but I think that's kind of a different form of challenge, because most of the fights really aren't that spongy, but I've definitely been enjoying it. I still need to finish Kazan, but I got totally waylaid by Path of Exile 2, so. Corn says, Kazan is not harder than Shadow of the Erdtree. I think it's different. Like, the way that Shadow of the Erdtree is challenging is very different from the way that Kazan is. Like, I think in many ways, Kazan, depending on your playstyle, might take a more mechanical dexterity to pull off compared to Shadow of the Erdtree, whereas Shadow of the Erdtree is a little bit more timing and positioning and effectively using your build versus the enemies. And then D&D Hydrate, welcome back into the stream. How you doing? Doomfist is the only one here that felt the DLC bosses were really engaging except for Metter. So I do think they were engaging. I just feel like they were a little bit over the top, and some of the bosses kind of broke some of the traditional expectations of what a boss fight entailed. And for me, the ones that kind of broke the mold a little bit stronger than others were, to an extent, Rolana and her spacing issues, in that she's just everywhere. Bale with his timing and spacing issues because he's just everywhere. Gaius with his hard-to-read follow-on attacks, and that might be position-based, which requires a lot more knowledge of his moveset. And obviously, Promised Consort being the frickin' Promised Consort. And to an extent, I really did struggle against Messmer until I realized you're supposed to double dodge one of his attacks, because I was so frustrated that he was actually still hitting me with one of his sweeping slashes, despite me like trying to block multiple times and position properly. The trick was you just got to keep dodging, which isn't very common, but at least like that was a solution. Mike thinks Radagon's the hardest in all of the games. Promise Consort version, of course. Jason, you're loving the Kazan difficulty? It never feels frustrating. That's kind of where I am. And Jason, you struggled with, what can I think of? My name! I just remember Oniwa, the horse guy in... Oh, for some reason I read that as Sekiro. You struggled against Gaius. Yeah, he was pretty rough. D, you still don't get Messmer's flying stab move, but it's doable, you think? I'm not sure which one you're talking about. Oh, do you mean the one he opens with? You could just iframe that. You just roll into it as he lands. Gobu, yeah. Okay, anyway. So, some of the bosses obviously have strategies. I am not a fan of the Messmer fight, but it's not super egregious. I think Messmer is probably around like the same level. Maybe, I don't know if this is a fair comparison, as like the difficulty of Dark Knight Gale. Did I call him Dark Knight? Wow, he's Batman now. Of Slave Knight Gale. Masataka, there we go. Thank you, Rooster.
Text.
At this point, it's a blatant confession to just being straight basura.
I'm not talking about people that are able to play this game full time and perfect everything. I'm a normal guy with a job.
Bro, what the fuck? What did you just say?
I'm a normal guy with a job.
That can't be a real statement, bruh. A part of the unique thrill to Elden.
And to be fair, I do think Waterfowl Dance is one of the most egregious moves, if not the most egregious move in all of Soulsborne history. Well, at least it's more memorable for me than whatever Promised Consort Radon does. Because Radon it just felt like it wasn't one thing that I could pinpoint as much as it was a confluence of them.
Elden Ring's craziest boss attacks is being able to learn how to dodge through it with finesse, if you're willing. As to when that became a bad thing, I don't know. Clearly, competence has run its course within the fanbase. If you thought they'd stick with the same boss tricks and AI for over a decade, and you proceed to piss and moan that bosses in this game quote-unquote break rules that you for some reason align with previous titles, I need you to listen closely. You're a fraud.
I knew it!
And no, I'm not pulling what I'm saying out of my ass. We can pinpoint Sekiro for this transition in design philosophy.
You need to leave!
Let me explain. Sekiro was the first real shift from the Soulsborne formula, and while I personally label it as one with the franchise because it's fundamentally the same but very much different on a mechanical level, it is still a deviation. While many fans could resonate with it, and
I mean, we could disagree with this premise already. You could say that Dark Souls 1 was a shift from Demon Souls because there was less gimmicks, although there were still some. You could also say that Bloodborne was the biggest shift from Dark Souls 1 and Dark Souls 2. So yeah, I don't know.
And, keyword adapt, with its mechanical gameplay differences, others couldn't. Aside from the movement tech, the various prosthetic arm upgrades available to you while simultaneously being limited to the use of one katana, and the fact that the player embodies a vocal protagonist as opposed to the standard silent protagonist in these games set in a world parallel to Japan's Sengoku period, an even more drastic change was executed that would redefine the underlying principles to the challenge of boss fights going forward, and that is the flow of combat. With only a katana and a prosthetic arm to utilize accordingly based on your encounters, one does not simply spam the attack button to hit him with the standard mink 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 from previous games. If you've played Sekiro, you already know where that playstyle gonna lead you. With the introduction of a posture system to bring your opponents to a stagger, as that is the only real effective way you can defeat any boss in this game, except for you. For the first time ever in a FromSoft game, the player is forced to experience a boss battle on their turf. There is no hack and slashing your way through this shit, nah.
That don't work.
There's no way out of this.
You're done.
With the tools at hand, the player must abide by the rules set by each boss respectively. How to best utilize the diverse resources the prosthetic arm offers, how to properly time deflecting boss combos, when it's most lucrative to strike back with the good old mink 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 before returning to a defensive position, and most importantly, respecting the standoff.
I am Melina.
We not there yet. Hold on. With everything I just said, you might be thinking that Sekiro's fundamental premise of combat is to play very passively. And to that, I must say, let me take your hand. Let me tell y'all why this game is peak. It's for the exact opposite reason of staying passive. It's important to be patient when learning the flow of the battle, but when the epiphany of the Maharaga moment strikes, your ability to be competent and play as effectively aggressive as possible will be rewarded. Every window of opportunity to attack when you can will determine if you're a worthy victor of the duel. It's just as my glorious maestro Blocksain Ishin once said. And it seems a lot of the frauds in this community complaining that shit is too hard, well, y'all really missed the point. Back to the main discourse. The slander over this game's approach to difficulty, it's kind of insane. And no, I'm not going to downplay genuine points of criticism that have already been discussed. For example, Melina's waterfowl being the common denominator in players biting the curb when fighting her, or Promised Consort Radagon having absurd.
I feel like half the video so far has just been memeing on people complaining about Melina, though. Like, talking about Waterfall Dance, like, bro.
Hitboxes which have been fixed since then. And you know it, I know it, everybody knows it. The duo fights in Elden Ring, they're pretty stinky, bruh. You will never be them.
Who the fuck is this nigga?
Get off the
Which is ironic because most people don't really complain too hard about them. Like, the biggest complaint I've seen is about the Godskin duo, but I think it's more about the fact that they're just a repurposed boss than a true dual boss. And of course, like, these guys are pretty rough, but the complaints about these two boss fights are nowhere near the level about the complaints of Melina or even Promised Radon.
team. But I digress. Going back on topic, I'm gonna show y'all how these combat parallels from Sekiro to Elden Ring are prevalent and use a few bosses as examples of that fact. Quick disclaimer, what I have to say is a lot more direct to those who like to run the ones and prefer not using any summons. It's kinda why this design philosophy simply works better in Sekiro, as opposed to Elden Ring where a mimic tier or any kind of summon can butcher the learning curve part of it. The behavior of the AI and the combat pace has changed without a doubt. Understanding and acknowledging the existence of a redefined system to the following is crucial: timing, windows, the neutral, and their indirect relationship with the importance of player positioning. Like I said, and this is primarily relevant to Elden Ring's most challenging bosses, you are on their playing field and you gotta abide by those 4 laws of combat to best optimize your approach. The importance of timing, while relevant to all games prior to Elden Ring, is much more prominent here than ever before. How you time your dodge roll in front of an enemy winding up a delayed attack can literally make or break your experience. Timing then goes hand in hand with what is considered the recovery windows of a boss fight. Gaps deliberately made for you to be advantageous and punish the boss, or to take that opportunity and to heal in order to properly reset. It's important to consider that not all attacks have a long recovery window. Melina the Fraud Exposer is a testament to that with how fast her recovery and reset windows are. And after I finish defining and displaying these 4 laws of combat pace, I'm going to teach y'all how that is the case through Melina. If you play fighting games, you probably know these terms, as frame data helps you identify on whether or not you can punish your opponent before they reset to the neutral, where both opponents assume a mutual position of a standoff until one or the other initiates the next move. It's a little game of whose turn is it. This is where y'all might find.
All right. So, Paisan, you played Sekiro after Elden Ring and had a pretty easy time, to be honest. Super fun, but you didn't struggle too much. So, for Sekiro, obviously, the real skill check is whether or not somebody can parry at the appropriate timing. And I genuinely think some of people's difficulty with Sekiro might be due to an improperly calibrated display setup or audio setup, or both. Because if your timing is off because of your hardware, it's like the openings in Sekiro are very tight to begin with. Methoda said, to compare to Magic the Gathering for a bit, what players want is new content, but Wizards keeps printing quote-unquote better cards. There's design space to try new things without making the cards better or bosses harder. To be fair, like, we've also played so many Souls games at this point that there is a certain staleness to the formula, and that's kind of why they feel forced to iterate the way that they have. But I do think the issue for me with Elden Ring and Shadow of the Erdtree specifically is that they kept giving the bosses more features, but the players just haven't really been able to keep up. So just to give a bit of a parallel example, like right now, a lot of people are upset with the state of the endgame of Path of Exile 2. And one of the common complaints is that when you get to the end game, it feels like your character is playing Path of Exile 2, but the monsters are still playing Path of Exile 1, because Path of Exile 1 is generally a much faster game and you're going to get swarmed, because in Path of Exile 1 you have a lot of like movement stuff to kind of mitigate all of that, whereas you don't in PoE 2. Methoda says, Sekiro and Bloodborne show there's room to try new things, keep it fresh without making the skill floor for the content higher. I would definitely say that the skill floor for Sekiro was way raised because they got rid of summons and leveling. Hey Robbie, nice to see you again. How's Nine Souls going for you? Have I tried PoE 2 since the update? Since like today's update? A little bit. Just a tiny bit. I need to finish getting my 3rd Ascension. Nine Souls is peak. Scowl easy. Every couple months you restart Sekiro and get burned out, but a little bit later than the previous play. I can give some pretty good Sekiro tips, which he might get into here, because I'll probably bring them up as a natural byproduct / consequence of this video.
find the most frustration in your experience, as the neutral is possibly the most nuanced aspect of this redefined approach to the relationship between the player and boss AI. It's the part where the AI has been changed to adapt and punish our shortcomings, or as some of you bums will excuse it for, input reading. With those three I've mentioned so far, there's the ability to have a semblance of game sense with knowing how you should position yourself in order to optimize all punish windows given to you. How to promptly position yourself where a boss will be after certain attacks in order to take advantage of those windows you otherwise wouldn't be had you rolled away awkwardly, and knowing where you should be by the time the boss returns to a neutral. So with those 4 laws mentioned and described now, emphasized in this game even a step further than in Sekiro's, you are punished for hesitating within your windows of opportunity. More than being punished for not taking it, the boss will condition you to remember this. If you thought it was your turn to heal or attack after not having done so during a boss's recovery window, the AI has evolved to take its own advantage within these situations. This time, it was you who made a window for that boss. You took the first step away from the neutral, and that is where you have to respect.
Yeah, I think the Godskin Apostle is probably one of the best examples of punishing the players for healing in a bit of a fair way. I think Margit also teaches them to an extent as well. And it can feel pretty rough if you don't know the positioning of those attacks where you need to heal. I mean, technically they're neutral when you engage the healing mechanism, but perhaps a greater criticism of Shadow of the Erdtree compared to the base game is that the telegraphs are worse for people to pick up on what the developers are laying down, and that's supposed to be the inherent criticism that kind of gets overshadowed by people's inability to, 1, articulate what their position is, or 2, understand what their actual problem is. So I've definitely got footage which I can bring up. I brought some of this stuff up in my Shadow of the Erdtree reaction video, which definitely pissed some people off because I told them that I played it way harder than they did. And they're like, oh, you didn't play the game like it wanted you to. Well, guess what? I played the game like it allowed me to, so get wrecked. Me.
Who made a window for that boss? You took the first step away from the neutral, and that is where you have to respect the arsenal behind particular bosses, because in turn, they can punish you for it. If you refuse to adapt to how this game approaches the principles of combat and keep making goofy ass comparisons to previous titles as an excuse to bash on Elden Ring's philosophy, that's tough. More than a skill issue, that is your lack of competence showing. I already explained what it is. It's right here.
Show it. It's right here. Show it. It's right here. Show it. It's right there.
And now, I bring to you the fraud exposer.
Mike, you found Sekiro a lot easier after plugging in your controller for the first 3 runs to remove the Bluetooth lag? I didn't even think about that. Maybe because I've played too much Smash Bros. I can't stand the input lag, so I always try to keep my controllers physically connected.
I am Melina. You will witness true horror.
I know you see her. I know you felt her. Alright. Let's start by taking a look at her 4-piece swing, where you get the sparks flying at the start and at the end. There are 2 variations to this. We gonna get into the not so punishable one first. Obviously, her startup frame gives you a fair warning that she's gonna start up this particular 4-piece. There is a chance she'll be slightly out of range to where she can't reach you, but most of the time, she will come at you with this from a very close range. If you mistime your dodge roll too early or too late, she will catch you at least once. There's even a chance she'll chain the attack 2 or even 3 times. Lord knows, her chain attacks has some of y'all moving like... As you can see here, I reacted way too late on the second chain. Now, assuming you dodge the attack, congratulations, you timed your dodge roll successfully. How?
I don't know if he did. Hold on,
Now,
let me...
assuming you dodge...
Hold on, let's back up.
As you can see here, I reacted...
So, I think the sparks are supposed to be an indicator of when to dodge properly, and if he had dodged here early enough to be in time with this, then he would have been fine.
Way too late on the second chain.
He would have probably been further in the position, and he could have rolled on time. So if you started dodging here
On the second chain.
He would have been like an extra step behind. I don't know why I pointed to the screen as though you could see it. He probably would have been an extra step this way and been fine, but I think that's probably one of the more fair Millennia moves, so it's
Assuming you
whatever.
dodge the attack.
And of course, like everything we could break down and say, oh, like this isn't that bad, but like I was saying before, I think part of it is that the tells aren't nearly as good as they used to be in the previous games, and the players don't know how to read the enemy attacks properly enough to put themselves in a better position.
Congratulations, you timed your dodge roll successfully. However, in this first variation, she will reset to the neutral really fast, leaving no proper recovery window for you to take advantage of. This clip is a clear indication of that truth. It was not my turn to swing, and I knew that. Had I died here, at least I'd...
Yeah, that one, she very clearly had the sparks come up, so her combo was still continuing.
Not my turn to swing, and I knew that. Had I died here, at least I'd be able to acknowledge it was my own greed and not some biased reason to fault the boss.
Like, if anything, I feel like Millennia is one of the slowest and easiest bosses to kind of read, with the exception of a couple of moves. She's very reactive to the player. Like, really, like, the hard part of Millennia is the War of Attrition and Waterfowl Dance specifically, and of course the Shadow Clone Jutsu attack in Phase 2.
Something you need to remember at all times is if a boss assumes a neutral stance, that means they're fit to counteract.
Although, to be fair, the first time I fought Millennia, I just kind of said, screw it, I'm going to bring in my summon once I got to Phase 2, because I didn't have time for that, so I punished myself by going back into it New Game Plus without leveling up my character anymore. So I fought her New Game Plus solo, mano a mano, and then felt properly accomplished. It took Impact forever to beat Melania. Heavy armor's heavy, especially with how meta big weapons are. So yeah, like you can definitely abuse a lot of stuff with like the poise type things and the damage reduction. I definitely seen Melania die in an all-hit run, which is where you don't dodge anything. So there are definitely a lot of tools to like allow a player success, but I think for the average Joe, certain things need to be improved.
Your next move or even initiate their own. You're not free to do whatever. With that in mind, you've got to be very cautious about your positioning and keep on your toes to anticipate Melinia's next move. She will always extend her combos with this first variation. There is a chance she will end off with an attack you can either punish or heal due to a longer recovery window. Exhibit A. With this leap into a charged dash, you've got a couple options. You can choose to roll away and dodge successfully and heal if you need to, or you can roll to where she will be and commit to a punish because you positioned yourself in anticipation. So that is variation 1. Now let's look at the other variation, which is punishable. First things first, time your dodge roll appropriately, nothing's changed here. But this time, as she finishes up her fourth swing, it comes out much more slowly and she's even off balance. That is your indicator for knowing you got the good ending of this attack string. Her recovery window is relatively long here, and if you're able to identify that through basic observational skill, you've got options. I mean, there's a clear difference here. You can take the liberty to heal that through basic observational skill. You've got options. I mean, there's a clear difference.
He is right, but I mean, for a lot of people who might not be super familiar with the fights, that difference might be hard to read.
Difference here. You can take the liberty to heal and properly reset during that window in which she normally wouldn't give you that opportunity, or with that final animation indicating she has ended her string there, you can position yourself to punish her. And that is variation 2. That's all I had to say. Flag on play. There's one more reason as to why I chose to talk about this attack string. Let's take it a couple steps back and think about what Ishin said. Something about Melinia's posture just scratches my brain here. Normally after doing this attack, she posts up and keeps going, but here, nah. I mentioned earlier that she's off balance with a very clear shift in her stance. She's lunged forward and hella off guard as she's caught all of her weight and balance into only one leg. It's kind of like she was hesitant on pressing you like she normally would.
Say that again?
I said Melina looks like she's hesitant when this happens. Wait a sec. That's tough. I can't even lie. This is the type of shit I live for, bro. Hey, word for word, bar for bar, Ishin, I see you. Okay, but for real now, though, that is all I gotta say for this video. If you've made it up to this point, that's a standing ovation from me to you. Really, I hope some of you negative Nancys feel informed, leaving this little TED talk from yours truly. The 4 laws of combat go crazy. You've got to compose your playstyle to timing, recovery windows, neutral resets, and your positioning. There is one more thing that I should have covered, but I really can't because I gotta lock into my final college semester, and I didn't want to spend more time editing this video, but I call them 50-50s. You ever felt like a boss in Elden Ring pull combo extensions out of their ass, especially in Shadow of the Erdtree? You ever played a fighting game before with a 50-50 mechanic? Yep. Bosses in the DLC function heavily on that 50-50 design philosophy, which is more oriented around your positioning while a boss initiates a combo. I'll definitely have a video for the future lined up talking about the 4 laws of...
That's kind of funny because I feel like that is what essentially sets Shadow of the Erdtree off in a completely different realm. So he at least acknowledges it, but I legitimately think like that is the kind of deal breaker for a lot of quote-unquote Souls veterans there.
Combat more specifically, and dissecting the 50-50 game mechanic I just brought up, because I think it's really overlooked and nobody really understands it. I don't know if anyone's ever even talked about it. And if you liked the video, subscribe please, hit the like button, share the video if you're willing. Any interaction helps me find my place within the algorithm much more quickly because I am new to this. I'll say it again, I really appreciate you for watching this video, and yeah, until next time, take it easy.
I also upload weekly shorts, so if you're into that, subscribe, Crow.
So honestly, all things said, I don't think this was a bad video. I'm definitely not the target demographic for the editing style, but I don't think there's actually anything wrong with it. So I'm not going to like dislike it or anything like that. I am disappointed that he glossed over probably the most egregious part of the Shadow of the Erdtree stuff, but hyperfixating on a couple of Melina's moves, I get the point that he's making, but it doesn't illustrate that kind of thing that bothered me the most about Shadow of the Erdtree. Now, obviously, I did have like some complaints about Melina in the base game, but let me pull up my footage. Wait, I already have my folder up. What am I doing? So, Impact Player was saying, as a fighting game player, you hate 50-50s. Welcome back in Without Horns. Nice to see you again. So, I've definitely got some footage. So these are just some of the things that I labeled BS in my playthroughs because of the times I was frustrated. So I put waterfowl BS. Oh, this is a 47-second one? Okay. Damn, I died quickly here. I think I was just surprised by how quickly she went into it. Yeah, but I have a lot of health here, and I think I was just surprised at how I got bursted. The camera did not help me there. I'm still really bad at actually dodging waterfowl. Like, I can dodge 2 of the 3 hits pretty consistently. But it feels like it sucks that unless I am far enough away when she begins it at the start, that I will not have a chance to get away. I was too aggressive there. Oh, that's probably why. I was probably trying to go for the bleed. Oh, that's what it was. That's why I said it was BS. Okay, I see. So I kind of screwed myself with my bleed proc, and yeah, she's like, okay, you're at the 1/3 phase threshold. Get wrecked, kid. I was like, oh my god, why is it happening right now? Because, you know, just a moment ago, she had that much health. So I kind of did that to myself, to be fair. But it just felt quite sudden. So that is a bit of my fault, but also not what I expected. So that is why it can feel unfair sometimes. It's a hard tack to dodge if she just does it point blank. To this day, I still don't know how to dodge all 3 hits. Minus, you know, the final flourish. So I said Rolano, one-shot bullcrap. Oh man, I must have been big mad if it took me a while to unrecord. Oh yeah, when I got to this phase. So it took me a really, really long time to understand how to deal with Rolana's second phase, it felt like. Because I still don't know how to deal with the fire sword. So I can pretty much only deal with her glintstone stuff now. But anyway. What did I do wrong here? I rolled too much right there. I'm like, oh no, she's coming after me. Give me a chance to heal. Oh, that sucks. Okay, so she reset to neutral as I tried to do that. I thought I had a little bit more time after her animation, but I didn't. So that's kind of what I meant about the gap closers. And the fact, I mean, obviously I had no blessings at this point, but it was still just pretty damn rough and not what I wanted to deal with. Yeah, so and so here I am spamming, and she was already into her next one. So that was a little bit unfortunate timing on my part, that I didn't know that she was going to be so aggressive. So, I mean, that was something that you had to learn, but at the time, it just felt a little bit bad. So I've got a bunch of stuff with Bale, because he pissed me off the most. You use Golden Shield if she does Waterfowl Point Blake Doomfist? That makes sense. But I can't imagine using a shield. Obviously, I used a shield for the DLC, because screw that. Paisan said, learning to beat Rolana at level 1 is one of your favorite moments in your lifetime of gaming. I do like aspects of the Rolana fight. It just felt a little bit rough for coming into it on a first playthrough. Right. So that was a little bit unfortunate. I'm supposed to roll, but like the visuals didn't really match that. This too far of a backup. Like, I'm fine. Oh, I'm dead. Like, why is he beaming that way, but I got hit? Like, that is annoying to me, unironically. I wait. No, I don't. I don't even have enough time to stand up and heal. So that sucks. That's annoying, but, you know, it's whatever. And then I just played poorly. Yeah, for this one, I was just upset that the visuals are bad, and then he's so far away that in the vast majority of the FromSoft games, like, you will have time to kind of deal with this. And just the speed in which he can gap close, like, this is almost lethal. So when do I even try to start healing? As soon as I come out of the roll, I think I'm probably mashing. And he's already going into his next attack, which is fine, I guess. But I'm just not a fan of it. Like, if he was closer, I would have played differently, but GG no re, get wrecked. And so this was the attack from Messmer, which really pissed me off. Not this one. I'm gonna fast forward a bit. Not that one. Am I out of stamina? That's the move that always pissed me off. So it took me so long to figure out how to deal with that. The way that I'm supposed to deal with this is to dodge twice. If I dodge twice in a row, he won't actually hit me, but it felt like my positioning... Hold on. At this point, I'm like literally behind him, and then all of a sudden, he's like going through me specifically. The fire got deflected from the wall? I think it's the ground, but yeah. Salt and Sanctuary has so many more skills than in Blasphemous 2. I do intend to play Salt and Sanctuary somewhat in the near future. So I'm looking forward to that. It does the level system from Final Fantasy X? Really? I'm surprised I've never heard that in relation to it. Alright, so... We're done on some real bullcrap is what I said? Okay, that's got to be fun. Oh, the Serpent Pool. This move really messed me up. So if it's at BS, it's got to be at the end of the fight. Okay. So he's not even in neutral, he's recovering, and then how was I supposed to know to not punish him on this move specifically when he darts around all the other times and it's fine to punish him. Like that's one of the things that annoys me the most about Shadow of the Erdtree. If that's what our friend wants to call it, the 50-50 moment, that's fine. Like that part is fine. There's enough of a wind up. See, normally you can attack him after he does stuff like that. I don't know why I attacked there. Maybe I think I was going for a stance break. This should have been a free punish, but because I committed to a jumping attack, I just died. That is the stuff that's annoying to me. Like, because of this, it makes me feel like I need to play more passively to watch what attack he's doing or learn what this is specifically. But he's got so many variations of this where he spins around beforehand. Where he spins like that, but then he doesn't bring up the snake goop that I was very frustrated by Messmer specifically, even though he's not as bad as some of the other bosses. He's definitely not one of my favorites. Easy grab punish, but then I got punished for that. Like, I still got punished for that. That sucks. Like, I'm still in my frames. Maybe that's because I'm using the Ultra Greatsword, but it's annoying. I couldn't see there. That's fine. Well, I mean, relatively. Get a Mimic. Wait for it. No, I can't punish. Or I can? Okay. No, I was too slow. See that move? Now he's not... Oh, he is doing the snake goop. Okay, that sucks. So, I'm wrong, and then I panic rolled. That was my fault at the end there. But it's just really rough. And you're like, look at that opening. And I'm dead for trying to capitalize. So that's kind of like one of my complaints about Shadow of the Erdtree. Like, it doesn't even feel weighted properly, I guess. We're done on some real B crap. Where's my mouse? There it is. Can't see. Yes, I think I was probably just blocking too much. But I don't know how you're supposed to deal with that other than like rolling through it. But I feel like there's been plenty of times where I've tried rolling behind him and still gotten caught. And that's probably why I was frustrated at this specific move. Like, this one move killed me probably more consistently in phase 2 than anything else. Like, I still don't know what I'm supposed to do. I think I've tried jumping and it doesn't work. He does have one attack where he's... Maybe this is the jump attack. Which didn't seem like it should have been. Do I have footage of my Gaius fight? I should. Yeah. Oh, I certainly do. BS one shot. I didn't abbreviate BS that time. Okay, let's see from here. Couldn't get the visceral off. That sucks, but that's my fault. Trying to heal. That is one of the moves that is super annoying. So I'm trying to punish because he whiffed an attack and now I'm dead. And he doesn't always do that move specifically. I rolled the explosion too early with the Radon one, I think. Jason said the one thing about Promise Consort is it was the first time you learned to use a shield. Yeah, I wasn't about to fight him without being able to shield some of the worst attacks. And I didn't even just use a shield. I used one with like a super juiced up holy resistance, and I was using the Ash of War to boost up my defense. I don't remember which one it was called off the top of my head. Don't fall. Yeah, so let me pull up some more Gaius stuff. Commander Gaius intro, comma killed. So this is my first time walking into the Gaius fight, apparently. This one wasn't labeled as bullcrap, I just think it's funny. Okay, buddy, how's it going? Hey, I dodged his roll the first time. I didn't really have I dodged his roll. I dodged his charge the first time. I didn't have too crazy problems with it. Sometimes it felt like it was just super inconsistent. I got stuck on the swords in the ground. That sucks. And then I rolled back instead of forward. So that was my first attempt at Gaius. I literally did 0 damage to him. That's funny. Yeah, so I was playing without any blessings that entire playthrough. The charge move is pretty bad. You never try rolling into it. You don't roll into it. You roll at either like 11 o'clock or 1 o'clock. So it's at an angle. Apparently this was tragic for me. Guard counter tracking failure. So this is me like kind of deserving to die. I'm not going to try to rationalize my way out of it, as much as I was just a bit more frustrated that my sword is going in a completely different direction. I do wish the tracking was better for jump attacks and guard counters. I thought guard counters were kind of disappointing in Elden Ring, to be honest, because when it got brought up as a mechanic, I was like, oh, this has to be pretty good, and then I got destroyed by the Grafted Scion. All right, so bullcrap spam. So we'll start it over. Where's neutral? Here, I guess. It's pretty rough. Barricade shield, that's what I was using. See, I got really lucky there. That's a move that killed me a ton. Whereas he finished his combo, and then I'd go to counter, and then I'd get kicked in the face. So it just kind of sucked that he could consistently do like a 7 to 12 hit combo, whereas I would get punished if I ever tried to do 2 hits. And sometimes I'd get punished for even trying to do the 1 hit. Yeah, that's what I get. Yeah, guard counters are good within certain time frames, but they just weren't as good as I was hoping they'd be. Without Horn asks, how good are the guard counters anyway? Because it seems like it has very limited use cases. So they're extremely overpowered when you're doing like a bunch of options to stack up your hit damage, and if you're able to tank an enemy hit and poise through them and destroy them. Like if you use endurance, it's pretty overpowered. I'm already dead. Okay. Oh, that sucks. So this is, he does have this as a variation of a move, but most times, maybe not most times, but there are a couple variations of the moves, which it took me a long time to differentiate this, that sometimes he just does this and doesn't follow up, and then other times he'll do this and lead into a charge attack, which I did not know at the time, so I was very frustrated at this sequence of events. Because it's like, okay, he's doing that, I have a free hit, nope, rip. And so that's kind of like one of my bigger complaints about it. It's that some of the attacks aren't as easily distinguished in Shadow of the Erdtree as in other parts of Elden Ring, or even, of course, as our guy Zaminical would say, the other Elden Ring, other FromSoft games, to bring those back up. Gaius can't block in time, have to dodge. Oh, I died. So that, I was apparently trying to block that attack right there, but I was stuck in the animation. And this is just a general criticism of like Elden Ring and Lords of the Fallen 2023 as well. If I had been spamming circle here, I would have been fine. But for whatever reason, blocking takes longer to perform, which is kind of annoying. Pixie says, a lot of the attacks that could follow up are dependent on things like your distance to the boss. Yes, that is very true. Jason, you beat Gaius on horseback. It felt a bit cheesy, but so be it. There were times where I did pull out Torrent. I usually saved him for phase 2 to avoid like his initial burst that he typically does. All right, Robbie, you have a good night. Thanks for joining us. Gaius, no telegraph, guard counter, faster charge, WTF. Yeah, it took me a lot of attempts to deal with Gaius. Okay, so that one, it pissed me off. Which attack pattern was this? That one. So yeah, there's definitely other times where he slams like that, and you're free to get the barricade shield guard counter for a lot of, you know, posture damage, but apparently not always. Commander Gaius, cool one shot. Now, obviously I'm playing without blessings, so I can't be too upset. Where's my timer? Oh, there it is. So I got to phase 2. I whiffed, that's fine. Oh, I remember this one now. This was really sad. I whiffed. It's okay, we're fine. Gotta get away from that zone. Oh, then my command didn't go through. I still had stamina. Yep, I just jumped for no reason, for sure. Yeah, I sometimes that happens if you try to put in commands, they just don't go through, which sucks, but it is what it is. D, you would only use Torrent if you felt you could not run his gravity orb. Yeah, I would use Torrent for the attack where he would go in the sky, and then I would just get the heck out of dodge. That one was pretty rough. Okay, holy crap. But my positioning must have just been off. No, but I'm like right in front of him. I did a barricade shield right here, and now I'm gonna get 2/3 of my HP destroyed because of the way he charged. That sucks. Where was I before that? Trying to avoid all of his crap. Okay. That's that damn attack. Oh no! That's when I'd pull out torrents. That! Rose! I needed to jump. But yeah, just like the timing, if you're not too familiar with that attack to begin with. Oh, I was flasking! So that's my fault, but I guess I didn't know the timing for this attack, so okay, that's why I die for sure. But also to just get one shot is pretty damn rough when I've got his HP down to the DN commander. So I feel like that's kind of pretty indicative of how some of my experiences went. Jason, you felt jammed up by the camera quite often against Gaius. That certainly was a factor, especially if you're on that wall next to the Shadow Keep. But anyway, like some of that stuff isn't too bad. Like you can learn it. It's just those 50-50s when you feel like you have a punish window against a boss, and technically they have finished their combos in different parts, but they can continue them in others. Now, sometimes some of that was based off of boss phases. So, for example, I could potentially argue that, oh, it really sucks fighting the Crucible Knight because all of a sudden he's starting to do this tail whip attack multiple times, but he only does that in phase 2. And once you realize it's a phase-based thing, you kind of have to learn a different aspect of the fight. Whereas like some of these 50-50s, I just couldn't read what the boss was doing to understand when certain moves were safe, which is part of like my bigger criticisms against Shadow the Erdtree boss design. But I didn't have that problem against most normal enemies or certain bosses like Midra, Ramana, or Metter, or even the Golden Hippo when I didn't have to deal with the camera, you know? So, yeah. D, you struggled with the camera on the Hippo boss? Yeah, that room was uncomfortable. Bro, doing that boss with 0 blessings was pretty rough sometimes. But also, like, when I was fighting Hippo, that was before they nerfed its grab, and that was pretty bad sometimes. Jason said doing that without blessings would have broken your will. For what it's worth, I did say that it did break me in my reaction video. Like, my intent was to go through the entire DLC not using any spirit summons and fighting the bosses 1v1 unless they had an ally or something. But I quickly gave in when I got to Renala. Granted, I was stubborn with Renala, or not Renala, Rellana, and I only used like my level 2 or 4 skeletal bandits. They might have been level 1 because they could reanimate, so that way I could just get an extra chance to cast my Rot Breath. That was essentially what I was trying to use them for. Just to give me a moment to heal or even be able to cast one spell to deal with the War of Attrition. So anyway, yeah, it kind of sucks being negative about Shadow the Erdtree, but I mean, those are my genuine feelings about some of the boss design, and they just feel very different to me than even Sekiro to a large extent. So that's kind of why I get rankled by people who tell others to get good and that it's a different game, because it's like, no, it's not a different game. It's the same game. It's just a DLC. It's not so much that the bosses are difficult. It's that the way that they're difficult doesn't feel as rewarding or fun to interact with. And I think if you go from Shadow of the Erdtree and then play a game like Kazan, it's kind of like night and day, where Kazan is pretty difficult, but it's fair. And because it's fair, people are probably going to say that it's not very difficult, like Korn. So, anyway, folks, I think that's about it, unless you guys have any other comments about how you felt about the bosses or anything like that. D agrees that the meta in the Shadow of the Erdtree is definitely different from the base game, but you didn't mind it too much. Oh, yeah, so, like, I felt like I didn't even have time to cast spells. Granted, Rot Breath is one of the slowest ones to do, especially if you're trying to get a full breath off, but I couldn't really imagine trying to play this game as a ranged character in the DLC because of how many gap closers many of the bosses have. Paisan said, you think it's just a matter of preference? No one's wrong for liking it one way or the other. Oh yeah, no, I'm not trying to say anyone's right or wrong, but I do feel like some videos along this line don't fully understand why others are complaining. And I think part of that might be because of the complaints that others are making is that they aren't articulating some of their issues. Global thought they were neat. For real though, Messmer's in your top 5. Mike says, before the nerf to Radon, he was so hard. Did I beat him before the nerf? I'm pretty sure I did. So anyway, okay, folks, that'll be it for tonight's stream. I want to thank you all for joining. Tomorrow, I've already got some videos queued up. So this one's been on my list for a while. The most powerful type of world building, moldy world building by Curious Archive. Then I want to check out the Erdtree's The Stamen by A Tragedy and what Bloodborne is actually about. So I definitely still have some time to fill up for tomorrow's stream, so I'll need to find some other stuff. And as always, if you guys have videos you want me to react to, feel free to let me know with a comment on the video itself, not the chat box, because I won't get a notification and therefore I'll forget. Or go ahead and add it into the channel feedback channel in the Discord. So anyway, that'll be it for me. Thank you all for joining. Hopefully I'll catch you on the next one at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So until then, take care, stay safe. Last Protagonist out.